Yo guys, Theo here on Common Sense. Welcome back to another episode of Human Beings, the podcast where we're very interested in individuals, both who they are today, what stories they have to tell, what they can teach us, what tips they have to give on, well, whatever I want, because it's my podcast, but also how they ended up that way, their origin story, as I like to say. The alchemy of becoming this person, okay? This is something I'm a huge nerd about, okay? What makes up an individual, not just the genes, right? What experiences do you have? What have you gone through to become who you are today? And today we have a very special episode. I mean, I feel like all of them have been special because they're so, tailored or whatever, customized, influenced by the guest, like how long it's gonna be, and that it's shorter doesn't mean that it's bad, how much we're gonna go into their personal story and just talk about the topic that they kind of know a lot about, right? But what's special about today's episode is that I'll be interviewing myself, okay? So that's kind of special in and of itself, but I think it's a cool idea. First of all, let me just tell you that it's a funny time to do this because my focus is kind of elsewhere. Like I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good, but it's like it's in the middle of Christmas. It's the second day of Christmas now. So days have not looked like the way they usually do. You kind of, not disconnect, but you just feel a little, you look at life a little bit different, and I still have some more Christmas things to do after this. But but I think that's kind of cool because I want it to be authentic, as if I was a guest, I haven't prepared for this, I'm not making it different when it's with myself, right? I've, just like with anyone else, I've written down like questions, just points, and I'm just gonna have to take it as it comes. I'm not prepared at all. So I like that. Then I just know it's gonna be challenging, because speaking to a camera is a special skill as like a YouTuber and content creator. It's kind of a strange thing to do overall, but doing now a long podcast just for myself, I want it to be one take, like, and I know it's going to be tempting to retake at some point. Like I've already thought about it, like, oh, I should, but it's both for the sake of time efficiency and just authenticity. What could happen? Someone could technically interrupt me here, like call me or something, but that would be only thing. I want to go through it, and I'll say last thing before we get into interviewing me, right, is I want this to like I said, it's going to be a little different what the episode looks like depending on the guest, but there's a certain format, a certain dramaturgy, a certain order of things. I try to paint this picture of, okay, where did it all start and what's our experience, and now we're here today, and now let's talk about the things we know about today, right? And so it's not, I'm super happy with how the interviews have been, but since I have more access to myself, that's how I've kind of outlined the little questions I have for myself to kind of try to shape a good alchemical story of becoming uncommonsensetheo of today. Okay. All right, guys. So who is Theo? If he is to describe, well, like I do, I always write down these little titles, right? So they're in no particular order. Theo is a natural and holistic bodybuilder, a coach, a trainer, a content creator, an author. And here he said he is a shadow worker and a philosopher. Philosopher, he wants to say that he never thought or called himself that. It's other people, okay, that said first, okay? And then something you might not know is a journalist. Being a journalist is technically not a protected title. Like you can call yourself that without having any education for it, which you can't for some other professions, right? But I actually have journalism education, and we'll get into that story a little bit, but I just wanted to mention that because you can have that in mind that, honestly, I'm just waiting for someone to tell me, like, great interviewing, Theo, you that fucking talk so much about yourself and your stories all the time, and your videos just go on and on like this, how good you are at putting the spotlight and getting the other person to talk. It gives space for them to talk without interrupting, because now I'm kidding, like I feel happy about it, but don't lie, just if you don't think I'm good at interviewing, but I feel good about it. But both being someone that has had that thing that maybe people think I talk too much sometimes, I like to show that I've really developed that skill of listening to and creating space for that. I might be a good talker, and because the way I work too, it's often the time for me to be the center of attention and talk the most. But I've worked actively, and I just want to mention that these journalism studies that I don't regret, but I think it wasn't the best idea, really. But I learned some things, and so how to interview is one thing. And I know that one thing people hate on podcasts like this is interrupting the guest when the interviewer won't shut up. It's one thing that the interviewer in between, gives takes, but specifically just when they're going somewhere interesting and you just interrupt. I have, however, noticed. It's funny. You don't know. I didn't know that I was going to talk about this when you start, right? But what I have noticed is that there's a little happy medium, because sometimes when someone is going on or talking, it's very interesting, but they mention something, and I've noticed that if I don't pick up on this and just ask them to elaborate right now, we might forget about that. So it's an interesting learning experience here. So if I have to say what I'm about, because I often ask my guest that, is, I'm pretty much the story. The way I view myself is someone who had a tough life, like a traumatic childhood, autistic brother, not good relationship with my parents, so it was not a safe, quite violent home. And I was exposed to that. I experienced anxiety and depression from early in life. I coped in many ways that young people, but especially men do, drinking too much, partying, weed, other vices, that kind of thing around partying, chasing girls, trying to hook up with girls, being successful sometimes and sometimes not, porn, video game, escaping life through hedonism. When a man can't find purpose, he numbs himself with pleasure, and it should be said to that too. When he experienced a lot of pain early and have figured it out, that's why he can't find a purpose, right? And then the only appealing option seems to be to just pleasure, distraction, right? But so I'm someone that overcame that, right? When we're going to talk more about the panic attacks that I went through later, but I basically had a very very clear rock bottom in life when these daily panic attacks started, what would be called like anxiety or panic attack syndrome, when it happens repeatedly like that. Long story short, for now, I overcame that, started building myself up, starting giving better habits with training and food a go, got a positive effect from it, noticed it so quickly that I knew this is the way to go for me. And then, long story short, I didn't know it back then, but I got so good results and so happy, and I completely changed, and since then, I've been so grateful. I'm coming from a place in life that, I thought I was doomed to be a certain way, that, I had some definitive, very negative views about life, the world, and myself, right? And I was just proven wrong. And I never thought, when I was in that state, that what I've experienced since then would ever be possible. And I understood, of course, that other people are in a similar situation that I would. They need to know. They just need to know. I need to get as many, because that's when I noticed, like, okay, this is great for me, and I'm enjoying myself, but I'm now in this, I'm now on this train. Like that. When I have found this gold, what's the point of keeping all this gold for myself? Everyone has to have it, right? So I started the YouTube channel, right, and exploring a little bit on an Instagram. This was like a year into my entire training journey and all that I actually started doing content like that. But I started becoming a completely different person. We're gonna get in all the ways, but when I want to say like what I'm about, that's in the end, And of course now, I've extended this so it's actually a profession for me. Even if I came into all of this just from a genuine, I found things that were amazing for me, overcame a lot of my old issues, became a completely different person. I just want to give that to others. But now, when I realized that, the thinking became like, how can I make money on this so that I can keep doing it more? It was never the opposite. Like, I think if I become good at fitness, for instance, I can make money of that. It's the other way around, right? But so, yeah, that's something. While making money is a thing, that it's important, like even because I'm someone that's never been super financially motivated, right? And many things I like to do for other reasons than money, but it is just a real thing too. So it's like a balance for me that I'm more the person. Some people are too greedy, right, and just try to get. I'm more been too much to the other side, but always looking for that balance, right? How can I bring what I do to more people, both for free as much as possible, then offer things to those that want to pay, commit more for getting more from me, and as any good relationship, there are two winners, even in business, right? Goes for romance, friends, business. But that's who I am today, right? But let's talk about how it all began. So, little Theo was born in Stockholm, where I still live. I lived here my entire life, with the exception of, I've traveled, gone on just shorter trips for usually not longer than a month, but I've traveled to quite a few places like that. But I've always lived here, except for Greece, where I lived a bit less than a year, a couple of years ago, right? But I grew up in Stockholm. And when I just tried to talk a little bit about what was my childhood like, well, I could pick up on quite early in life that, I was different. I felt it very much in a good way as little, that, I felt like I was smarter, and I didn't think of it in any, you can't even have ego about that when you're little. You don't even realize what it means. I just noticed that I felt a bit like I'm talking to little kids sometimes when I'm talking to kids my age in kindergarten and little school, whatever you call that in English, The thing I could pick up on was that, but I didn't see that as a bad thing either, but I was not aggressive, violent. I got into a lot of fights in kindergarten especially, but I've never been the initiator of violence like that. But so something that I don't talk too much, I've never talked too much about it in my content, but a big thing that shaped me is that I grew up with an autistic little brother. So he's 2.5 years younger than me, right? And this is the thing, it's interesting because I'm doing a podcast with myself, and just like with everyone else, I feel like, how am I even going to get to all the interesting things I want, blah, blah, blah. But so maybe I'll just have to do like I intend to do with other guests, just have them back, because the whole upbringing, abridging through years and years, right? If I try in a nutshell, so my brother, autistic, we noticed something was different with him, and then we learned that he is autistic. And so from my view, how I experienced it is, I get to understand from very early that someone can just be born different. And now I don't really view that as that he has some kind of handicap, as they call it. It's just in this modern society that doesn't really, that is problematic. But the way it's presented to me, it was clear, he is very different right from the start, and it looks like a curse in this world now. When that he didn't do anything for that, right? And clearly, for us, when we're small, there were mainly problems you could see with this, right? But so that's both one thing that I just had to see so early, the unfairness of this, because I have had strong empathy from early, okay? I find this very interesting. We talk about alchemy and what makes up a person, because even childhood trauma, I could elaborate on every little word I say now. Childhood trauma, I think it's good that we're bringing attention to it now in many communities, it's a talking point, but I also don't like calling everything trauma. Some things are just, programming, the way you get shaped. But so when it comes to things even trauma, but certain traits, it's interesting because they are reinforced or shaped or created in childhood. But I know too that some of these things, they are stored in the DNA, and some of these, even a thing like abandonment issues, because that's the first thing that comes to mind. If that's, if your family has a history of that, you're going to get some of that already in your mama's belly. But so one thing I can see that I had completely without any life experiences first to make me that way was I had strong empathy, almost so much that it hurt, So, anything that I'm taught, Sweden too being a very atheist, secular country, right? Everything I'm taught about religion, it all even sounded just like a fairy tale. I don't understand why, none of that makes sense. But then when I got this experience early in life that, my brother, born with this curse, we have so much pain and difficulty in our home because of this. And what did we do? How could a loving God do something like that? Which I now see as a very, understandable but immature and childish way of seeing things. But so this, for me, what is, because me and my brother, we would fight a lot, right? And so, of course, lots of siblings fight, but this is in a different way. Because it's not just that, you know, I understand also that some people, even with like regular siblings, that there's going to be some things that shaped you, maybe some trauma, even from rivalry like that when you were kids, right? But the special thing here is that it's over such unreasonable things that my brother reacts. Like, kids could, of course, be unreasonable generally, but I always say this as the example. And one thing I just was not allowed to do was lock the bathroom door. And because he couldn't explain it, he just freaked out if someone else did that. And it's you know, when it's so hypocritical because he always locked the bathroom door. And it's just so unfair and unreasonable that I'm going to get beat up for locking the door. But that's just what happened. You know, he could not be reasoned with. And I knew, I was smart enough as a kid to understand he can't help this. But so you see, it's a very tough situation to always have these. And of course, I want to say, I have always felt like it's toughest for my brother and cared most about him, right? But now this is also part of my trauma, that I didn't get the focus ever. It's always, I'm supposed to always understand that, yeah, it's more difficult for him, you know. So that's what I'm always provoked and like get punched and stuff over things that are completely unfair. And all the time I'm told also that, you know, he doesn't understand. He doesn't know, you can't get angry, you know, you can't hit back because he doesn't understand that I have to be above it, you know. And I'm just, because I realize it from this point, when I mentioned anything about my like brother or parents, I want to be clear that it's just me. I've spent so much time figuring out the alchemy of myself, right? What happened? Why am I the way I am? What happened? What went wrong, in a sense? But then it's of course both with my own family in mind, that I don't want them to think that I'm holding a bunch of things against them if they listen to this and hear it, right? But it's also just in general that I'm big on forgiveness. It's like you have to understand and be able to talk about what went wrong, what you didn't get that you would have needed as a kid, what wounded you and how, right? But then the point is to just see it, to say that was not good, you know, that hurt me, but I forgive you, I move on. But so, because I think that's an issue, and there is a stage of the healing journey where you might have to be angry when you realize some things, you know, realize that shit, I have these problems because of these things that happened to me. But the goal in the end is always to forgive and let go. So I just want that to be clear as I go forward. But of course, because my parents didn't get the support they should have either with like my brother and like about me, you know, no one talks about that. Because what happens for me, apart from this, that I get complete codependency programming and complete like learning that my needs don't matter. I have to put someone else's needs first, and I have to always go out of my way to understand their unreasonable behaviors that hurt me, you know. And this is what I'm shaped as a kid, but also at the same time, I don't get enough attention, you know, I don't get validated, no one tells me. I of course understand for everything that goes on that this is unusual, like something is different with my brother, but no one tells me when they tell me, for instance, that, you know, oh, you have to try to take it, you have to try to not fight back. Like validate me that I'm doing a good job, because I was thinking about this all the time, you know. I was always trying to prevent violence and fighting between us, right? But I never validated in that. And of course, a kid like my brother takes a lot of energy and attention, and so I just got too little, right? And what happens then is that when something bad happens, though, now you're gonna, because, you know, let's say we're actually talking about being in a home, and I don't get attention, but if I don't break something, then it's like, what did you do, you know? And it feels like that, and no one gives a shit about me, you know. My needs, my feelings don't matter, no one cares. I'm just a burden, I just fuck up. That's it, because that's the only thing I ever hear, right? Yeah, and so it's so interesting because I realized this is a huge part for me, right? Everything around my brother. And we're going to come to the alchemy, how cool, because that's what I feel like, when I become both to like actual coaching clients, but to many of you guys that just follow here, sort of big brother figure. And that's, of course, what my upbringing taught me also, to be extremely loving, caring, and understanding. You know, I get emotional almost because it was difficult, and I have to get to say that about myself, that I did a great job. You know, I tried my best with all of that. And, that's something I want to come to later with alchemy and healing. There's always another side to the coin. Like all strengths, everything, every time you see someone that's exceptional in some sort of a way, because I think I am in certain ways, right? But it's always on the other side of the coin, on some kind of pain or trauma or some dark trait like that. But so if we talk a bit about, because this, what happened with this basically, someone like me there's never peace in the home. And I'm going to go through, I guess, some traits I've developed from all of this, and the good and the bad that comes with that. But when were we? Oh, see, now my instinct is I want to pause, because I was like, where was I even? And I can't just throw the ball to the other person and like then think my way back. But okay. Yeah, we get back to like the traits, but yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I guess that this experience, I realized, a big brother figure. That's what I try to be. Someone that's not above you, as in, of course, you can always look up to someone that they're like better, further ahead with like fitness, for instance, than you. But I've never strived to be like an actual authority figure that I want you to feel like I'm above you. You can be inspired and be like, man, you make me want to. But you see what I mean? And that was interesting when I talked with Natural Hypertrophy, how he thought in a similar way with that I'm just like you. That's why I tell my personal story, my pains and my problems so much, so that you can see yourself in me. And I invite you to join me here as my brother, okay? But so let's talk a bit about how school was for me. So early in school, like I said, I noticed just that I was smarter than other kids. Like things that apparently were like difficult, tricky for others, they were more like just tasks to be done for me in school. Writing, like I didn't learn to read like exceptionally early or something, but it's just because I wasn't introduced to it exceptionally earlier. I remember when I was 5 early in school. I remember that I felt like it was stupid that when I was taught because I knew the alphabet or something, and we started like, the letters, they kind of sound like how you read them. It's similar to the name of the letter. I was like, it was easy. But so school, I went to school in one school until I was 9, and then my parents wanted me to apply to this choir school, Adolf Fredriks musikklass. It's like not a secret. It's a big school in Stockholm, and so it's pretty much like you go to any regular school, just you have choir lessons also. And so I liked my class so much that I didn't want to switch, but I understood that it was prestigious somehow, because there were 3 from my class that applied, and only me got in. You did a singing test, right? And I was also bribed with a phone. It was a Nokia 3410. I remember that I had said, 3310 and 3330, those were the big ones. And I said, I just need a 3310. And then I got the one after that, and I was stoked. I started in this choir school. Funny thing, in middle school there, I had not been super popular with girls as a little kid there, But in middle school, I was like playa. I was like cool in my class. I was together with 5 different girls, and many others were like, had a crush on me. I was going to say were in love with me, but now being older, the way I look at how we feel, it's too much to say that like a 10-year-old is in love with someone. But so I started getting problems in school, which were not just about the way school was, but all these problems I talked about that I have at home. And I don't, because I could, because it's interesting and it's something to learn from. But, I fought a lot with my parents, like it's not just with my brother, okay? Like it's just all over no good. And pretty much I think it is because I have a lot of pain from everything when my brother, how things have been, and they don't understand me, and I'm not approached as like, let's help you out. I feel like it's more like, I'm a problem, I need to be punished or controlled and things. But so it's both this, that I've just had a childhood with a lot of shit that beat me down, right? and then school switching to this, because it's funny, it was like more problem solving based in middle school when I think about it, like math is of course always like that, but even that you would like write things like with grammar, so I don't know, the way I recall, everything was just even history and stuff that you just, I don't know, practically you read more, you do a little play about things, you just do stuff that makes you remember instead of just listening and writing down shit only, so because someone like me, and I saw that, right? Like I knew I was smart already. Like, and when I say that, I don't mean like I saw myself like some kind of genius, but I know that when school started feeling like bothersome, it was not because I was stupid. I knew, right? And I saw the pattern that okay, there's like little differences, but mainly, even if it's like you can argue whether some information is worth knowing or not, etc. Whether it's history, geography, biology and chemistry, it's really not so much about anything else other than memorizing certain information so that you can write it down either in an assignment or on a test, And so, because I wasn't feeling good, I was skipping school sometimes, just, this is before, when you're 13, at least for me, there's no drugs or anything like that in the picture. But, escapism, I'm up late, so I want to sleep and I don't want to go to school, I don't feel good, I have anxiety and depression on and off, But so yeah, so I got diagnosed with ADHD after a while. Because, the thing is, I had these feelings that it's not really me that's the problem here with school. Like, of course, that I skipped school is one thing. But of course, on some level, I feel like, I don't want to be there. It's a stupid thing. Like, why do I have to be there? Like, I'm not saying that you should just let kids do whatever they want. But the point is that I know that, because now I see that I was right. Not that I should have been just home playing video games, but this way the school was, it was never for me, it was not good, and it's kind of not right to treat the kid as if they're the problem because of this. But the point is, when you're a kid and everyone treats you all the time, oh, let's have a meeting because Theo is skipping school, or what can we do to like kind of fix Theodore, You do still, you're going to pick up on something is wrong with me. So I know that I agreed and wanted to do the kind of ADHD, what is it called, evaluation or whatever. And I ended up getting diagnosed with it, and I learned from those tests, I remember then, that I had higher IQ than most. It was like 130 or something. I was 14, I think. But yeah, and so first I get this medication, because somehow, I feel this, that apparently I need to do this shit that everyone else, I just memorize, sit and read stuff, So, I didn't get Ritalin, but it is one of it's called like methylphenidate, I think, the compound, that are different forms of. So that I got. And it does make whatever is like right in front of you easier to just stare at, focus on, lock in like that. But I remember it just made me, who already struggle with like anxious feelings sometimes and that's something I wanted to say, being in a violent home where there's a lot of fighting, like both physical with my brother, but just yelling, shouting, loudness like that. You're gonna be an anxious kind of person because that's a survival mechanism, you have to be on guard all the time because something can happen all the time, right? But so this kind of medication, it made me feel like anxious and nervous for no particular reason, That's the way I remember and I thought of it, that this feels like being nervous about something, just that there's no particular thing, So I gave that up, okay? I'm glad I did. If some people, I'm not black and white when it comes to medication. It's just that I feel like medication should either be an intervention or something you take, every now and then for certain things, ideally. Of course, I understand some people are just going to have ended up in like situations where it seems to be the best choice to go on some kind of medication. I just want to be kind of clear with my view that, as little of that kind of thing as possible, if so, intervention or every now. It's like, what do you say in Swedish? You say vid behov, like at need, basically, But so I am glad, at least for me, because this is what makes me so angry later that I'm over now. But this is what I mean when someone is like gifted, and it's like instead of like how can we fix for this smarter kid, can we fix education where they can flourish. And instead it's like, how can we dumb it down, this kid? It's not to say that all the other kids are stupid, but like we're different, and it's like, how do we limit this guy with medication so that he can just be a good little follower like everyone else, But yeah, and I guess that you could mention that again, just that choir school was a thing. Even in high school, there was like this unofficial extension of the school I went to before, where it was the same thing. You could go to, I don't know what this is called in English, but a science program or a society program, just with choir too. And the funny thing is, because the way I got by in school is that if we would take on like the entire country's average, I always had like, really good grades, but not the highest, because my thing was that, I didn't feel good. I had these conflicting feelings of, I feel like a lot of this is stupid and I don't see the point, but I also feel like I should be a high achiever, and I get all these messages about this, right? So what I ended up with was, I could get like almost the best grades with almost no effort when I did the thing like skip class a lot and, but just the day before the test, like catch up. I could get like maybe not always the highest grade, but the second highest grade or something. But the point is, to get into this high school, you would have needed the highest grades, unless it's the choir line, choir program, because it's this exact same program otherwise. It's just that half of what you're determined on, it's a music test too. Of course, I can sing in the music theory. I'm a little bit, I was going to say genius, not necessarily, but I'm really good at music theory. And why I say that is that because a lot of people that go to choir school, and that they're not actually, lots of people even that can sing struggle with music theory. But because of this, I could, with my pretty good grades with the singing test, still get into this school, right? And I'll say that a lot of my school experience, because I talk about having like a troubled childhood and that, but it's not, I've never been so like, I'm privileged in many ways also that I acknowledge, and I went through good schools. I had a good time in many ways, right? But I just wanted to mention that the choir has been a big thing for me. But so after, it's funny because I started thinking like, how many things do we want to get into here, right? Well, I guess I should mention just that something I started struggling with in the teens, I guess, was stage fright. And it's kind of interesting. I know now it's a big fear. It's a lot comes from my mother that, she sees similarities between us, and she talks about how we are, and we have to think about this because other people are like this, and if we are like this, then pretty much, if you are your authentic self, you're going to be rejected and abandoned by other people. That's really the message that I'm getting a lot, right? So because naturally, as you see, I have a sort of leader, stand in front of people, guide people, content creator, kind of, that's what I'm kind of made to do. And I was naturally good at that thing as a kid too, but I got this like trauma and had extreme stage fright, like not just a little, like that's the closest I ever been to panic attacks before having the actual panic attacks, right? I'll just tell you an example that in little school or whatever, I'm like 8 or 9 years old, my school celebrated 100 years, and I was so the crown princess of Sweden. We're a monarchy. She was gonna come, and I was chosen to like receive her or whatever, and like walk her to her place in the church where it was a like ceremony with things. Then the day before, by coincidence, Astrid Lindgren, a very famous Swedish children's books author, she died the day before. And so I was just asked on a whim the day before if I could read out loud from the Lionheart brothers, I guess it's called in English, Bröderna Lejonhjärta. And I was just like, I understood that it was big, so I got little butterflies in my belly, but the way I felt about it back then was like, oh yeah, that makes complete sense. I'm always much better than the other kids when we read out loud in class, So I just read this in front of the entire school, and the crown princess, and some Swedish politicians and stuff. And it went great then, but I developed in my teens from all this, my very, anxiety-inducing and insecurity-inducing childhood. I developed this stage fright, and we're going to come back to that. But so after high school, first, the thing about me was like, because even when I talk about the ways I would struggle in school, that, I don't really care about it. I'm not have the best mental health anyway, and I'm just not good at this, like sitting down when I don't see the reason to just, that when I see it as I have to learn this shit just to pass this test, I don't see the use of it whatsoever. I'm not good at that, right? But what I can think about sometimes is I think if I had just a more calm and safe childhood, maybe there would have been more space to notice certain things in school I actually found a bit interesting about, like history and things, you know. Because now I was living so much of my childhood in a sort of survival mode also. But why I'm saying this now is because, you know, while some people had plans for, I want to travel after high school, or I want to keep studying immediately, or I'm going to work before I do this, you know. And of course, a lot of that is not that people are so ambitious and, you know, going after what they want. It's just people are some people go on that path completely out of indoctrination from society and their family, right? But it's also good to have some direction in life. And I, unfortunately, again, spending so much in survival mode, you know, pleasure, that's like the only thing that came to mind, because I didn't know. I had already like felt, I thought, suicidal, like not actually, you know, but felt like, why am I even in this? Am I just in this world to suffer? You know, it felt a lot like this. So after, you know, school was a safety in the sense that, you know, I think a lot of people can just relate to this, whether you were like all depressed and troubled at that time or not. But after school, suddenly you don't automatically have this thing you're supposed to go to every day where you have a bunch of your peers around you. Whether you have friends you see in your free time or not, you're always just surrounded with these people. A lot of people are like half friends, you know, that you're friendly with, you kind of like, but you wouldn't hang out with them if you didn't go to school. And so this is a thing when you quit school, right? And so, well, I know that the first thing I did, I had no ambition. I didn't know what to do with myself at all. And I guess I didn't feel so good immediately after high school, because now that thing, just going to school like that, is gone, and I have no idea what to do. But the first thing, I went on like an interrail trip with 2 friends. I guess I got that in like a student present or something. And that was just, you know, we were just drinking, partying like crazy for that entire month. It's crazy. You know, guys, I have so many stories from like if you say, like, of course I can tell stories and tell you things I do and interesting things now too. But I mean, like, more like all crazy and wild stories from my life. It's more like back my teens up to my, like, well, up to pre-uncommon sense, pretty much 25. Different kinds of stories to tell after that point. But so what I do eventually, after just some months of, I think, just being at home with my parents, you know, not doing shit, pretty much, not having any money, not knowing what to do, I got a job, sales job, sold lottery tickets, you know, on the phone, pretty much. And again, it was a similar thing, you know, like that kind of job. It is a lot of people, like post-high school people, that it becomes a little bit like a grown-up kindergarten in some sense. I will say about that company, though, that they were very serious. It wasn't like, you know, telemarketing is annoying. You can discuss the ethics anyway, but when it comes to doing it ethically, they did it as ethically as possible, I would say. I forget that, but I sort of had a girlfriend at that job. But that was it's interesting, because I was someone, since quite early, it's not something I'll go in depth in, because I already see that I'm still fucking talking about my background story and we're this far in. But I guess it's because it's about me and I know the story most. But pretty much that I know that it's from the mother wound, when you're traumatized by your mother, which you, by the way, can be without it being as explicit as her being like, you know, my mom was never violent physically to me, but for me, the way she would just yell and be so angry, furious at me from when I'm way too little to be, like, I'm talking 3-4 years old too, you know. She might as well have been physically violent, that's what I say, but you can have an overbearing, like, loving, super nice mother that has also traumatized you in a sense. But the thing is, the ways your mother made you feel unloved, you're now trying to get love from the feminine, that deficit, by, like, well, when you're an adult, like, mostly sleeping with girls, right? But validation, like hooking up with girls when you're younger, can just be together, you know, but so, you know, having that on your mind and looking for girls as a sort of escape or vice, you know. And so it's just kind of interesting that when I think back, that I felt like little chasing that, you know, when if I'm involved with a girl, probably I'm pursuing and maybe too much, insecure, blah blah, a little bit beta, younger, But that every once in a while, I would just end up in that situation where some girl just liked me more. This girl, she was a nice girl, but I just remember that I feel like it was on her initiative. Things started with her and me. But I quit that job eventually, because to not talk about the more uninteresting things. But I was recruited to another sales job by coincidence, by calling like a sales recruiter that thought I was good, but I didn't like that job when I came there, and I quit. And actually, this is something interesting that I haven't talked too much about on this channel. But one of the best things that I did before Uncommon Sense was that I learned to make... I was an online poker pro. I learned to make money playing online poker. And it sounds more glamorous than it is, because, not everyone that's technically just a pro, that you do it for a living, that's how you get money to pay for your life, you can be pro without being like a celebrity on TV or make like millions, right? There are a bunch of grinders, like we say, like this too. And so from this time, I just spent a lot of time, because a friend of mine started playing, and I felt like, poker is a funny game, because a lot of people feel like they're pretty good at it. Lots of people just feel like they're good at it when they're not really, But I felt like I was, but it's definitely a game you have to learn too. But so again, now I've worked a bit, I have some money, I just spend a bunch of time trying to learn poker. And this, to like kind of do the abridged version, it didn't always go that well. And I have some years now when I probably sometimes don't have shit for money. I feel very isolated. I do have friends, but they're, kind of people like me at this point. Struggling on and off, anxiety, depression, right? But at some point, I got good enough at poker to be able to make money from it. I can remember the first tournament I won. It was a $11, $7.5 thousand guaranteed. That always exceeded the prize pool, But it was like $1,500 for the first prize. And I won that tournament. Like, I didn't just come to the final table, I actually won it. I'd say I'm actually quite good at poker. I think I could get rich at it if I wanted to, but do I, And that's when I started noticing at a point that even when I adjusted to it, it was like I was up all night playing poker. And it was cool. I did make, not like I said, I didn't get rich, but for my age, I made more than most. And also that it's tax-free, and I don't have to wait till a certain date to get paid. I get paid whenever I want, But just this, like, I was up all night. I would like go up like at fucking 5 in the middle of, and not like in the evening, sometimes, because maybe I went to bed just before lunch or something. And at some point, I just noticed that I'm not really liking this. Let's quit while I also have some money, Like, I've never done crazy things like borrow money to play with, but definitely been like on tilt and invested and lost more than I should have. But my actual own money, never borrowed money. But then at around like 21, 20, I start noticing all of this with political correctness, Like, I've never been into politics at all. My biggest, I consider myself a liberal, but classic liberal. So I never saw myself as left wing, but it was like, legalize marijuana is like the biggest, most important political question to me. I actually wrote like an argumentative essay in English, I remember, in high school, that I got like the highest grade. Like, not only if you think of the highest grade, but also with the grading system on that of assignment, it was like literally I got 100%. And I remember the only commentary, my actually great teacher, she was, my English teacher, but it was just a little question mark, I remember, at the bottom. The point is, I was not into politics or following the news, but for whatever reason, I read some article and saw someone just go on about white men in a very aggressive way. And this was shocking to me, because I always just heard that racism is bad, sexism is bad, homophobia is bad, all these things that, it sounds reasonable, right? That if you hate someone just because they're a woman or just because they're black or something, that sounds about right when you're not into any of that, right? Then suddenly you see this go on and on. against white men. Of course, because that's became like my obsession now. Like I'm sure many people can recognize, just following the news and then alternative media, just keeping track on everything that's happening and kind of raging and reacting to lots of things. And of course, then I figure out that okay, you can't really be racist or sexist to white men because power structures, patriarchy structures, blah 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 blah. But yeah, I basically. I identified with the label alt-right. I never felt like want to say that I'm an actual Nazi or something. I remember, but it seemed my opinions. I seem to be alt-right, and just to be clear to those who are into that kind of thing, I mean alt-right, not alt-light. Okay, that should tell you something at least. Funny thing is that when I'm 21, because I've been raging at this, and that one thing, because I'm lost, like I don't know what to do with my life. One thing, because I am good at it, I'm good at expressing myself and doing media even, like this, right? So naively, I'm like, can I study journalism, to do a change from the inside? And I visualize the best case scenario for me would to be, someone that writes like, argumentative stuff, more than, like in the end, not the journalist as much as a you can be a journalist still, that you report on things, but more of the opinionated kind was the way I always visualized myself. And because I'm just looking at my notes, there were several things happening at once there, but like I noticed from early in the system is messed up from within. I went to a notoriously left-wing school, and pretty much all my politically correct feminist girl classmates, they can pretty much do like activism for their assignments, and it's just like, oh, great job, because at this place, certain things like equality, and thinking about with a female perspective and stuff, this has no political affiliation. This is just humanism. This is just, and so I was undercover alt-right basically in this place. It was kind of terrible. I'm so glad to not be that person anymore. That feels like they have to hide. It's social pressure. It's a kind of people pleasing. But it's of course you cannot work in the mainstream media if you don't have opinions that are allowed within the mainstream. You could be left wing or right wing, but just within a certain frame, right? But also many of these people, of course, political affiliation, and it's not everything about the person. Of course, there were some people in my class that I got along with. I had some friends from there. I'm still a little bit in touch with some, but the point is that for a lot of people I felt like I couldn't speak out to, it is a sort of people pleasing, because I'm like, I shouldn't give a shit what these like losers, to be frank, think about me. Something I just want to mention, because I've kind of forgotten about the choir. One of the best things, there was a major thing for me that I did after high school also. So I was in there even when I kind of didn't work much and was like lost. But I joined a choir, which is one of the best men's courses in the world, 08. And I'm not going to talk so much about the choir like that, but it's a special choir, and this was like my baby in a sense, that this was like my thing that I found meaning and purpose in, and I was also involved in the leadership later on, like on the board. I was like social media manager actually, but marketing manager. I got gigs for us, had media contacts and stuff like that. But I just want to mention. And I had a great time there. I haven't been in the choir for some years, but because I was still in it for a while when I started Uncommon Sense. I just want to say that I remember that time fondly. It's just not fitting right now. Choir could, but that should be mentioned, that was a huge thing for me in my life. And with this sort of choir, like it takes a lot of time, just rehearsals and extra rehearsals, retreat weekends, complete rehearsals like that. But you compete, you have concerts, you go to festivals that have multiple different concerts, you travel all over the world doing these things. I've been in many different places with this choir, right? And one cool thing is that it's like an extension a little bit of being like in a class and going on a school trip, because it's not so much, when would I travel in this case even with like 40 men somewhere as an adult otherwise? But yeah, it's around this time when I start studying journalism. It's funny. This is so interesting. Like I said, I'm really interviewing myself. I had no idea exactly. Like, of course, about certain things here, but this is also when I got into my... I guess I had a girlfriend-ish when I was 18, 19 there. But, okay, this was the first real relationship I got into, and then further down the line, like actually living with someone and that. But the funny thing is that she was... Because I see that we live in a universe of oneness and duality at once, right? I'm a non-dualist, if you will. But so everything around us is a reflection of us, you know. So opposites attract. So it's interesting, like in a relationship, of course, there's going to be some common ground and values and stuff, some things you agree on, but there's going to be, in certain ways, you're just a mirror image of each other, for better or worse. But so, just like I was this sort of angry white male, you know, like I've said in other places, like not a literal incel, because I would get laid here and there, but having this kind of resentment towards women among other groups, you know, being very angry about everything political and that. And yeah, I got together with someone that was the same, but just from the other side. And that was just, what was annoying is though, that of course, around then especially, you know, being a feminist, you know, anti-racist, all that crap, that was of course very encouraged. And she would like just lie beside me and scroll Twitter, and I would just see horrendous shit in her feed, you know. And I felt I cannot, like, because my things are not, you know, it's one thing if you disagree, you know, it's one, but those are racist things, you know, those, it's again, it's like this over ideology, you know, like in the school, like, oh, equality, but that's not left wing or right wing, you know, certainly not communism. You know, but that, it did not feel good that I had to hide so much of who I was in that relationship. But of course, it was a good experience. I have no regrets about that. I have no animosity towards her. You know, my first experience living with someone, and I noticed some things about myself. Definitely things I can connect to my childhood as well. That's a very interesting thing. In the romantic relationship, that's where most of your, like, just stuff is revealed, you know. Both the good and the bad. But we often, it's the bad we have in mind with that. But yeah, I wanted to break up at a point. I think we were officially together for like 1.5 years, but you know, I've been courting her for a few months before that, and we're gonna come to, there was some extension after that too. But you know, I pretty much wanted to break up because I felt trapped in certain ways, that I, you know, felt limited in, oh, when she's here, it's not like I can bring up this, you know, racist YouTube stuff on the TV or something. And, you know, I guess I felt it wasn't right. Like, I was glad at a certain point, long after this, I was glad I got out. But, yeah, one thing, I felt like I needed to sleep with more girls, which is, again, it's this lack. You know, you're trying to fill this void of love, that from without, you know, and it doesn't work. You cannot. You have to fill it up from within. Because now you see, even when I got it, I have a girlfriend. I found her very attractive. You know, a very cute, beautiful Swedish girl, nice butt, everything. You know. But even like, you know, it's not enough. I need to sleep with more girls for whatever, because I feel like that should make me more content, feel happier about myself or something. So I get out of that relationship, and you know, I do sleep with some girls, and in particular, you know, I felt great first getting out of the relationship. I remember when I came home, I was like, man, it's empty. I can do whatever I want. I should say, it's you know, I just want to be clear about that girl. Not that it really matters, but it's not that she ruined things so much for me in my home. That's just how I felt about it. I felt limited, right? But so I feel great initially. This is also, right before we broke up, I had lost weight actively. It's the first time ever in my life that I, like, Like, I mean, the only time I actively went on some kind of weight loss process before Uncommon Sense. So, because I was kind of taunted by some guys that I had gotten a bit fat in my relationship, because apparently, you know, I didn't view it because I have such high standards for myself. I guess I never viewed it as I was so fit as a teen, you know, but I guess that's the way they saw it. And I saw it as like, okay, challenge accepted, you know. So I pretty much ate low carb because I heard about it, and Pokemon Go was new. So I went on tons and tons of walks, and I had lost like 8 kilos or something. So I looked good getting out of the relationship. Also lost the fluff. But yeah, so I slept with some girls, and in particular, I think what made me realize that, you know, pretty much, well, that I made a mistake breaking up with a girl. Not really, but, you know, made me realize that maybe this wasn't what I was looking for after all. It was actually sleeping with, at the time, well, I guess it's a friend now too. It's just that I don't, it's his sister, by the way, just so you don't get any ideas here. I don't see him often now, but a friend's sister that I always found very, like, beautiful, exactly my type at the time. We were then very Swedish looking, you know, big boobs. Why do I mention these things? It's like, you know, but yeah, I remember I was so flattered. I was surprised at a party that she, like, showed interest in me, you know. And, you know, I hooked up with her a few times, you know. It was never romantic, but we saw each other more. But just that was something that, in the way I looked at things, that should have made me, like, really happy and content, feel really good about myself, but it didn't. And then it was like, oh, maybe it was something else I wanted after all. Like, oh, I made a mistake with my ex, you know. Now I want her back a lot. And suddenly, you know, and also I start, never mind. Like, basically, I remember I started missing the sex, you know, sleeping with her when I slept with others. So I guess, even if I don't think that was right, there's a reason when you actually, because I didn't intend on getting into this relationship. It was like the first girl I ever saw from Tinder when I had gotten the app, like, more prepared to, like, oh, have a bunch of one night stands or the like. But I somehow caught feelings for this girl, you know. And I think all relationships and all, like, it happens for a reason. It says something about you. And so my point is that even if this was not the right relationship in the end, there was some kind of chemistry connection, and I could notice that. I didn't get the intimacy I guess I had somehow developed with her, with others. So I wanted to sleep with her again, and I guess it happened, you know. And it was insane in comparison. And I just remember, like when I hadn't done it with her in a long time and been with others, you know. Like, this is interesting. I did not think about talking about this before either. But I can just remember I want to get back with her so much. And I feel this is what I mean sometimes with incel mentality. It's like I have almost a hate towards her too. Like, being this fucking feminist fucking hoe. Like, you know, she wanted to, liked to give off like she is like a slut. Like, she was very loyal to me in the relationship, you know. But, you know, how certain feminist types are, you know. And I felt like, because she had what I wanted, the sex, right? And I felt like she had such power over me, and I also, some things about her, like, annoyed me so much, right? So it was, but I also had these very soft feelings, like, I love her, I want to take care of her, I want her to be with me, and all that, you know. But yeah, it was a very toxic thing when I want to be in a relationship, but it's always this, like, when sometimes, like, late, we'll meet up, when we've both been out in different places and drinking, partying, like, fuck, you know, and it's, yeah. Anyway, but what I see is just that, man, like, sex and women can really be addictive like that, you know, like. But I remember it was so, like, when I found something lying around from her in, like, my apartment, I smelled it, I got, like, so horny, you know. I just feel weird that I just spoke about this, and this is what I mean, like, should I even keep this in, you know? But anyway, I'm just sharing experiences. You know, that was something I was thinking about before. Sometimes I talk about things that talk about myself, things I've experienced and feel and stuff. But it's really just because I know that I can't be the only one, you know. So I just, want to say things because I know that some people listening will recognize parts of it, right? But so now, you know, I at some point I had to give up on this girl because it hurt me so much. Because I'm actually someone that really, when I wasn't traumatized and felt like I needed to sleep with all these girls and that, I know that as a little kid I've always wanted like one girl like that. And I couldn't stand the thought that we weren't exclusive and all that. So I had to cut it off eventually. And I felt like complete shit. You know, it was my first biggest heartache experience like that, you know. But yeah, so I just cope with life the way I've done. Like the choir, cool stuff going on with that, you know, but school, it's become like I see, like I said, I never want to work within the mainstream media, but I'm kind of avoiding thinking about it. It's just what I do right now. I have a little side job too, blackjack dealer in bars, you know. But, you know, because I don't know what I want to do with my life. It's like, it's just something to do, right? But then I sleep with some more girls. I guess there was some girl I was like almost in a relationship with, but yeah, this is what happened then. That right towards the end of the journalism studies, I started like facing more clearly when we're supposed to have what is it called? You know, like internship or like practice, like for school, and when you're supposed to apply for that, like you're applying for a job, right? When I got a few interviews and I was talking about them, when they asked me stuff like, "Oh, what would you like to do here?" And when I remembered what I felt intuitively, like, not fucking shit, I don't want to be there, you know. And I just realized that I've spent these years studying for something, like, and I don't want to do it, like, you know. And I've been someone that's been partying and having all these crap habits, with eating poorly and drinking, just losing weight once, right, some weight like that, but never getting like fit, and you know. All these unresolved trauma from childhood, and yeah, where am I even going now? Yeah. That's the point. Is that because now we're gonna lead up to the panic attack phase soon, and it's just there was not one thing that led to that. It's like I still kind of heartbroken over that girl. You know, I start to realize that, man, have I just wasted all this time and put myself in debt over something that I don't really want to do. I also have all this like abstract just anxiety and depression, and I have, you know, my physical, I have IBS, I have poor energy levels, bunch of just not good existence, right? But so I had some after it was a summer break, right? Then I'm gonna go back do this practice internship thing. But I just realized I'm too lost right now, and I had started a temporary summer job, just a customer service job on the phone, and it was okay, you know, but it's not well paid or something. It's just a simple job, you know, just helping people on the phone with rental cars in this case. And so at the end of the summer, I just realized I feel too lost. I'll just stay working here for a while I think about things, you know. Rest of my life, you know, like I say, some stuff with the choir, partying, just like, and so now, because I want to talk a little bit about the lead up to the panic attacks, that I know, and again, I'm very alt-right, spending time, like, lots of time thinking about things like that and following things like that. And one guy I followed, he had written a book, they call it like the revolutionary phenotype, I think. And it was this book about how DNA, once upon a time, it was created by RNA, but it kind of, did a revolution and made RNA its slave. And it was this book about how that was going to happen, kind of another time. Like, pretty much if human beings start handing over our reproduction to a machine, and he explained how this, how the machine will take over in a sense, that we will live to serve it, you know. And this is because I was completely godless, right? Completely angry atheist type, like I talked about early here. My kind of upbringing just made me not want to consider anything like that. Where are we now? Now I want to pause because I lost myself completely. Oh yeah, so I guess I gave myself one pause here instead of just being silent for you. But, you know, when you cannot find, when you try to make sense of the world, you know, try to find something that makes it all make sense, and you calm down, you know, when you don't believe in anything higher. I think many end up with a very biological worldview, and that's one reason why I follow that guy and why I saw his book, you know. But I guess I had a lot of existential crisis. Apart from all my other problems and even my physical, my body not working great, I had all this existential dread about like, I'm alive here, I'm suffering for all these reasons, and none of my emotions, it doesn't really matter, it's just a biological function of me, and I'm just a coincidence experiencing suffering, kind of, and freaking out over it, And I can see now that before actual panic attacks, there were a few times when I almost had a panic attack. I remember being in a bar, and it's just like further in, so in there, you don't really see out. There are no windows, right? I just remember just feeling like claustrophobic in there, and I had no history of claustrophobia. And I had to express to the guys that, like, I have to go out for a bit, I remember I called down. And then I remember another time, like a month later or something, when it was actually the New Year's Day, partying on New Year's Eve. I actually had a pretty good New Year's Eve, I remember, because, people have high expectations on things, and then they're disappointed. And I had that experience many times with New Year's Eve. So I decided I'm not going to have any expectations on it. And then I actually had a pretty good evening. And I remember I had also been smart for once. Because with alcohol and such things, this is behavior I see a lot for people that are kind of in the nihilist mindset, that when you don't have a stop button, I never even considered how much I'm supposed to drink. I'm just going to keep drinking. But at a time like that, I had actually been like, I'm going to be at this party for so long, so I buy these like weaker beers, so I can keep drinking them with not getting so drunk. I'm just telling you this to say that I wasn't super hungover, but my friends were. And I offered to go buy us all pizza. And so they were living in this house with kind of a skyscraper, many floors, like 20 floors, and they live like, I don't remember now, in the middle. And I went to collect these pizzas. I'm like in a good mood. And I just remember when I came back there, and we were there for a while, I just got this, just in the same way like the claustrophobia, but I got like a fear of heights. I felt uncomfortable being so high up, even though I'm in an apartment, windows and balcony doors closed and everything. But, it's like I feel uncomfortable about it and get all these like obsessive thoughts that, I could jump out of a window and stuff. And I had to leave, So these are some things looking back that were the kind of foreshadowing for the panic attacks. This, again, something that I don't... I keep forgetting and remembering that I saw when I was going through all of this existential crisis, just pretty much escaping and coping in many different ways, having some good times with my choir, and but a lot of what I do is escape suffering, pretty much. And I realized that I'm too comfortable. It's like, even though I experience all this discomfort on the inside, something about just going about life the way I do is just too comfortable, because it works. And I thought about this, how in the modern society, that because you can take survival just in the, literal sense, as food, shelter, warmth, most people around here can take it for granted, right? But now you have all these other things that you have to worry about, and it's like, you're not pushed, because you even struggling like that, I'm still never gonna fear death or anything. So it's like, it's too difficult to change, and I'm like aware of this, and I kept thinking I need a life-changing experience, near-death experience was kind of something I thought. Just 1 second, someone did call, so I guess one more pause, but I'd been thinking that, but the way I've been thinking about the near-death experience was maybe more like, being in a car crash and surviving and feeling like grateful and having a new appreciation for life kind of thing. But, I was thinking about that, but I also thought about how you cannot like stage that. Of course, now, thinking back, I could have done something that's just an intense experience without being like near-death experience that you could simulate. But the funny thing is that life often gives you what you ask for. It's just that it doesn't look the way you think. Because what I was served was, of course, this panic attack thing. So it's one day at this job. If we talk about the job, the way I generally was then with certain insecurities and stuff is like I'm someone that has had people-pleasing tendencies. It's quite specific because I'm definitely a complete and always have been people displeaser in certain ways. So like I can be provocative and cocky, like knowingly, and if I don't like someone, I'm not going to try to please them, But in certain situations, I would. But for instance, if I work at a customer service like that, if someone is angry at me about something, like with the freaking car rental that I had nothing to do with, I'm just the one picking up the phone now, it was like I couldn't feel bad about that. I couldn't take it personally. So the job didn't stress me out so much. But there was one thing that they had a thing. When I started working on a different line just to make things simple here, they had some problems at this company, okay? And so pretty much, to make a long story short, people sometimes, there were invoices that had never been sent to people and suddenly are sent like 2 years later for, significant amounts. And of course, it was people that never paid for something they should have paid for, but who doesn't understand that someone is upset if out of nowhere you get like an invoice with a date from 2 years ago? It's like, $1,000 please, And I mean like $1,000 now. Like those were the kinds of prices on those. And I remember it did stress me out to sit and pick up and you had nothing good to say. It had to do with the problem with the internal system, right? And you just had nothing good to say, no good news to give. It would take a long time for them to get anyone to get back to them at all. So I remember this started stressing me out, just that, the person that's upset about something now, even if it's not my fault personally, they are I understand completely why they're upset. This actually does suck. It's completely unreasonable, but somehow I have to try to defend this company and just make them hang up, basically. Make them be content that someone will get back to you about this, So that stressed me out a bit. But so one day, point is, it wasn't the job that stressed me out so much in general. It was all these things leading up, wearing myself down with all the poor habits, going through certain experiences and that, leading up. And now, this is part of the mix, that this new thing at the work that I felt pretty good at. Now this stress moment, And it should be mentioned that during this time, of course, now I know these things because now I have a good lifestyle. That's pretty much my thing. I become the polar opposite of the guy I'm still talking about now. But I would, because I would eat a lot of junk food because I had no energy and it was the easiest thing to just pick up some junk food. Like I ate a decent breakfast and often decent lunch, but often my dinner and everything on top of that was like crap. And lots of alcohol, even in the week with people, beer, But when I had zero energy, don't have to cook, Junk food is the cheapest and fastest, unfortunately, Because I know that it wasn't just indulging in junk food. It was the convenience of that. And I often think to myself, how good would it be if it was like fast food that's not junk food? Like it's cheaper and faster, but decent nutrition, But I did a lot of this. I stayed up too late, even though I needed sleep. But even when I started going to sleep pretty much on time, it's like I was so exhausted. I was burnt out, from a crazy childhood. But it's like, because sometimes people think it's silly to talk about that we're coddled. How can we get burnt out? But it's also weird. In one way, we're just exposed to so much more. There's just so much more being pushed into us that just makes more sense. Just not something just going wrong, But the point is, I would not dreamless sleep. Even if I've slept like 8-9 hours, I need like so many alarms to get up. I'm always late and stressed in the morning, to this job. But so one day, I have this panic attack, right? That, I'm sitting like this, connected to headset and, calls coming. I just remember, if I try to recall, just how everything feels ultra high definition suddenly. Like, I hear every little sound in this office, and everything feels like just knives flying in the air. And I start looking down on my hand, and I'm like trembling, which I have. That's a thing related to the stage fright thing. It didn't exactly make it easier. I have a heritable condition that I actually always tremble a little bit. My baseline is that I'm not completely still. But so that made my stage fright worse. But in this case, now panic attack, I remember my hand was just like this. I'm sitting freaking out. Like, what do I do? What is going on? It feels like it feels like some kind of psychedelic drug, but I didn't take any drug, you know. That's scary. Like, how can I feel like this, you know? And I remember just hearing the other people talk about the regular mundane things. It felt so strange because I feel suddenly like a life or death situation, you know. And a big thing that's so interesting, you know, that even when you feel like this, you're still, because that's so funny that that's one of the reasons that gave me a panic attack in the end. You're so afraid of how will people see me now. Even if it should be like, okay, if someone has a panic attack, it's understandable that they're kind of, you know, shaken and have to leave, you know. But it's like I'm afraid of what will I come off as with this. But finally, I gathered courage, told my team leader that I think I'm having a panic attack, and she saw it on me immediately. She let me leave, and it felt so, you know, it felt so shameful still because, you know, at this workplace I'm like a pretty cool, relaxed guy. Like many times in the lunchroom, like, you know, I'm often without like trying to and being too much. Like I talk and make the other people laugh and stuff. You know, this is how I want to be seen. That's the part of me I want people to see, and this is a part of me that I feel is so dirty and has to be hidden away, right? But I come out, and the thing with a panic attack like that is, you know, there's some relief in coming out into the cold air. There is also this immediate, like, but there's still definitely some kind of thing going on, you know. Walking towards a bus, realizing I cannot get on that bus, even though it's not completely packed. It just feels claustrophobic. Again, I have no history of that before. It's just that when you're so in that fragile state, you know, it's like every little thing you could fear or feel the slightest discomfort around is just amplified times 1,000, you know. So I walk towards the subway instead, but the subway is like, no, I can't. And this job, you know, it wasn't super close to me geographically. So in the end, I walked almost 2 hours home in the middle of the winter, you know, it's snowing. And I remember that my first intuitive feeling, I remember I was walking over this bridge. That was like, I'd like to chop wood, because there felt like there was this huge disconnect with my body and my mind, and it felt like there was something that could like center me a bit, you know. And I remember a very uncomfortable feeling of feeling as if I'm not really looking at things now. It's like I'm wearing VR goggles. So if I look at my arm, it's not really my arm, you know. It's something I just see through my VR goggles. Very uncomfortable feeling to be knowing that you're looking at your own hand like this, but it just feels like it's someone else's, you know. But so I came home, and I remember that when I stand and look at my hands, and it's like freaking out, and I'm really in this kind of like, oh, what is going on, you know? So I feel like, have I gone crazy, you know? Like, you actually think you're going crazy. I remember when I Googled to try to figure out what's happening, it's like feelings of unrealness, you know. I managed to, yeah, it is a panic attack. And there's that story of, oh, when you're a primitive human being and a lion on the savannah, and we talk about the fight or flight response and how that's what a panic attack is like, but how other things, stresses, trauma, you know, it can get triggered into a kind of state. That's, of course, in general, with a sympathetic kind of nervous system response, is many things we see as like we have to be action, you know, we have to do actions and perform, and that. For modern human beings, that's not always so very physical, you know. That's why it's not so helpful, you know, with a fight or flight response for a thing like holding a speech, for instance. Like getting the mild butterflies is good. It makes you kind of sharp, and, you know, getting way nervous, panic attack-like, is of course not helpful, but it would be if you actually just have to fucking run from something. But the point is, when you read about this, it always says that, so it feels very uncomfortable because it's happening in like a strange timing, you know, but it's not dangerous. And I just remember how little of a relief that was, because it felt dangerous, because it feels like you have an enemy within, you know, that so I would, if I just ride this out, it's not dangerous. However, I feel like the way I'm feeling is so intense that I'm a threat to myself, because I might not handle it. I might end it, you know. And that's when I realized I'd never truly been suicidal, because now when it feels like, oh, someone else is suggesting suicide for me, it's like I don't want to die, right? I just remember this lasted for so long, and I just watched Seinfeld. I remember just trying to take my focus off of this finally this started coming down, and I felt like such a relief. But I also knew that this just was not the first time. Because it was so shocking, that first panic attack, that even though I got like new like panic attacks that rose up into full-blown panic attacks, it was as if after that first one in particular, it was like I was in a mild state of panic for like around 10 days. That I remember it felt like I was watching this disconnect feeling, that if I wasn't acutely distracted, I would kind of feel as if I'm like seeing myself from over there or something. I feel extremely uncomfortable, you know. So many times when I'm talking to someone, I have many like short flashes when I'm listening to them, when I just see myself like fighting this discomfort, you know. And I remember at this job too, when I'm going to grab like a paper here, and when my hand that I have thought that I'm going to take this enters my field of vision, I still like react as if someone's like had sneaked up on me, right? And so, but yeah, what I did, and this is what I did so fucking well, honestly, is that I realized immediately that it's so tempting to just hide inside now, you know. But then that's going to be my life. That I'm not going to be able to go outside. I also don't want to go on medication as like a cure for this, because I'm just hiding the problem, you know. And I understood intuitively that, you know, my body, the fight or flight, lion on survival, for whatever reason, my body sees all these situations as a lion on the savannah kind of situation. What I realize now is that, you know, because there was no one particular thing that triggered panic attacks in me, what I've come to understand since is that people's nervous systems can be like, I could get so nerdy and into this, but, you know, they can be extremely overwhelmed. Do you also know that can you recognize just this, that some things, sometimes they don't really bother you, and sometimes you're very annoyed by it. In the other, when you're very annoyed by it, you're more depleted, you have less bandwidth, right? And so a person that's me, that's been like worn down on all levels, mentally, physically, spiritually, really, for so long, it's like my bandwidth is so short. So everything that's like a minor stress that I maybe even wouldn't think about otherwise, that's like enough to push me into panic. Now I don't exactly remember how I started talking about that, but yeah, well, I guess that I just understood that this is the case, and on some level still I have to expose myself to, even I mean I didn't quite understand this with the overwhelmed nervous system back then, but because that's part of it, you know. But one thing was just that now, because it becomes a little bit like this, that there wasn't one particular thing that was a trigger for me, but because I got the first panic attack at the job, for instance, just the association with the place, you know, so I wanted to overcome that association, you know. So what I did, I still realized I need to rest somehow. So I went on sick leave 50%. So I had this routine, going to the job, trying to be there for long enough and going home, you know. But many times I turned around when I just see all the people in the subway, or I freak out during a call at the job, I go earlier, you know. And like this is pretty much a program that I go on, you know. And sometimes I would just not be strong enough to take one day and be home and then get back to it. Something that I keep forgetting too is before Uncommon Sense and the strength training, I did start running because I felt that intuitive, you know, I felt like chopping wood. I didn't have any wood to chop available to me, but there was a treadmill in that building, you know, and running is what up until that point is what I've done the most for exercise. And it's just one funny thing because, you know, naturally, I would drink less and stuff and do some of these bad habits less during the panic state because I just, you know, I was more at home, so I don't go out to do that stuff. But also, I just, you know, even if it's tempting to escape, if you're close to panic attacks and you drink some alcohol, like that's a big relief. You know, you're not going to have a panic attack now, but the next day when you have the anxiety from being hungover, now you're even more likely to have that. But what was it? How difficult this is, you know, to talk so long and remember everything you say. Yeah, now I remember. So the point is that I did all of those things like naturally less, but of course it was still very tempting, and that was all I knew, right? To try to escape through hedonism and pleasure this way I had. And so this is just a funny detail, okay, that I remember that when I was out drinking, when I had been running for some months, right, after not exercising much at all in my 20s, well, I slept with this girl, and I just remember that I noticed how much longer I could go on when I had better cardio, you know. So, yeah, that was a long night. Yeah, but so this was the program I put myself through, but I wanted to talk about just a few, like, highlight moments with this, apart from that first panic attack. And that would be, I guess... Well, one is just because, being in the choir was so strange, just coming to this choir, standing among all the people, and I'm pretty much in some kind of weird panic state, there. But I remember going to a board meeting that I was in, just having a full-blown panic attack, heading there, showing up to the meeting, and when I'm directly asked about something, I just had to say that, okay, I'm going through this thing with panic attacks now, I'm very much facing it right now, so... I'm going to just stay a bit quiet here at the start. And I remember it was quite nice. It was like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Like my choir colleague here said that, and then they just went on. And I've noticed that that's often a thing for me, that if I just get to say, even when it's a thing like panic attack, if I don't feel like I have to hide this, put out this facade and pretend I'm fine, which comes a lot again, from fighting with my brother, and I have to just be fine because he's struggling more. It comes a lot from that, But if I just get to say, this is how it is right now, it's a huge relief for me. Even now, even it doesn't have to be, let's say there's some kind of social happening and I feel a little like just, mainly withdrawn. If I just get to say that somehow, that, I'm sorry, I don't want to feel boring, this is not blah, blah, blah. Just explain it somehow, then I get some kind of relief. And then it's actually easier for me to come out of my shell because I don't feel like I'm forcing it. So in a similar way here, now that I got to say that, I could sit and like gradually calm down. And I remember at the end, it was just as normal. And these things started feeling like such huge wins for me, And so another time was with the choir in Moscow. When, choir people, they drink quite a bit. We traveled with some other choir too. So now there were girls here too, But so stupidly, I couldn't help but go out in the evenings and drink and stuff, which does not help my state, right? And so when we were going to have one particular concert, because I was probably quite nervous and anxious about all of them when I'm in this state, we were going to have one in the Moscow, the Tchaikovsky concert hall, in Moscow. And I'm just freaking out before having this panic attack. And I'm thinking so much if I should escape it or not, But then I end up going, because what I'm thinking to myself is, singing-wise, especially because we were with another choir on this concert, like my one voice, it's not like, oh, we need you so much, like that it's going to make such a huge difference that I'm not there. There are tons of other bases, right? But just that you have certain positioning, and then I just had to mess that up because I'm feeling bad, So it wasn't my best singing performance. What I ended up doing was like singing all the notes that are in like my comfiest, part of my register, and everything else I would just like mouth, pretend to sing, just so I keep up the appearance, I keep my spot and contribute where I can, right? But to me, this concert is just surviving, right? I feel like I'm facing death. I always knew that I literally wasn't dying during panic attacks, but it's an experience as if you're facing death. And then afterwards, that was a huge win for me, I know. And just to not talk too much about this, I actually competed with a quartet so now my voice is even more exposed. Now it's just me singing my part, right? It was kind of cool thing to do, badass thing to do when you're facing panic attacks. But so, at some point here, the panic attacks have finally stopped, because it was this first panic attack that was like ongoing almost for 10 days, a little bit, but full-blown panic attacks on a daily basis, at least once, maybe twice, and then they started happening, not maybe even every day, but I'm in this sort of anxious, not great state all the time. Finally, they actually don't happen at all. And now it sounds like I feel very good on like an emotional level at this point. I've gained so much self-love for the interesting part about me, because this is something I've learned again a lot from my childhood, I realized that I'm not going to be able to talk. I talked so much about my backstory now. I guess, I mean, whatever, you know, that's what I'm doing here. But I have to think again. Well, yeah, that pretty much my upbringing, I realized that I so much on a subconscious level, you know, have not learned to look out for myself. You know, like I feel like I'm for others, that I, you know, in the case of my brother, because that's how that was kind of modeled, you know, that if I behave wrong, then he can hurt me, but also if I hurt him back, then that's not good because he doesn't understand as well as me, you know. There's so much I learned that I have to do things for others, and it's nothing about looking out for myself. And this is an interesting thing, you know, everything is a spectrum. I'm going to talk about that, but you can be too selfish and too selfless. Funny thing is that when you're too selfless, in certain ways you are that because you're selfish. You selfishly want to be selfless, and vice versa. But the point is that you can be too much of it. You have to be selfish, and so you have to put yourself first in many ways. But both with, of course, if you're completely selfish, you're not going to give as much to other people as you could, but also you're actually going to get less for yourself if you don't share with others. But so my point, I always overgave and shared too much and had no boundaries, and got used or exploited to some degree by people. Happened to someone like me. But also what I've realized about these panic attacks is that when I started facing them, it wasn't even for me. It was for other people, mainly my parents. I was thinking about that. I cannot do that towards them. You know, me being 25 as I was at the time, killing myself. What will they think? Because even though I didn't have the best relationship with them when I was younger, and that, you know, I know that that's what I talk about. That it's not about just blaming and pointing the finger. You want to understand your parents. Ask them about their experiences so that you understand where they came from, you know, and that they tried their best. So the point is that I definitely, they've had a hard time with my brother too, and now like, the good one, the more higher functioning one, killed himself, you know. I couldn't stand the thought of it. So it was actually for them I started, but then I gained a lot of self-love for myself because I could see what big of a struggle I was facing, and I started doing things for me when I had to say no to people and had boundaries, and saw how well it worked out, you know. And I just went against so much of my old programming of feeling as if I need to be there for everyone at all times, you know, that I gained self-love and started doing things for myself. So coming out of the panic attacks, that's what I mean, that I was like physically still quite worn out, you know, and therefore, you know, it's like I have that kind of physical anxiety that, you know, if I'm in a place, like I talked about coming to the subway with a panic attack and it feels it's too many people, maybe I started feeling a little bit like that, a crowd is kind of intense, but I wouldn't get like a panic attack, you know. It was like, and emotionally, I just felt good and so happy that I come out of this hell, like these months that felt like many years. Like, just like how a psychedelic drug trip, right? Some hours could feel like days, right? Like this is a very similar thing, going through panic attacks over and over and over again for months, you know. Feels like such a long time. So this is when I'm like, okay, maybe I should give this with training and eating a healthier diet a go. Well, you know, they say that does something for more than just your physical health. So I started doing negative pull-ups every other day, because I had a pull-up, or I had done that for a few months. I've done something like that before, you know. I start just walking a bit more, you know. I start just cooking some food. Chicken, rice, broccoli would summarize quite well what the food I ate at the start looked like, you know. Maybe not the best, maybe a little, not the most nutrient dense, but removing a bunch of junk. Just a couple of weeks of literally just this, I could clearly tell that I felt better when I had this sort of, you know, physical anxiety I talked about, and just when I came to a situation like that, when there's more people around, I just felt like there's something in the way. I just feel calmer, you know, and so I knew this was the way to go. And from at some point here, this is just, I don't know the exact moment, but that's when I consider myself healed, as in not completely, because I've learned that, you know, wounds go deep and they come back, but there's some sort of, it's that moment that I tried to get that in different episodes, that flick the switch moment. Something after that with the panic attacks, and starting the training and just seeing this, how, everything I feel like running from, when I run towards it, I get stronger, I overcome it. Things that feel difficult now, if I do them, something else is going to feel a whole lot easier later down the line, you know. So I started finding this, and you know, here, from this point, it's like, you know, this is when I start training lots of things, and there are like different things to go into. So instead of talking about the entire timeline, I think I'll talk about like one thing at a time. We can talk about just finish like my life a little bit like that. That, okay, so I had abandoned these like journalism studies, right? And if I had done like 40, 50%, maybe I would have just called it like, okay, that was never meant to be. But I had literally like one semester left. I felt like, you know, doing 85%, I just couldn't feel good about that. Like, okay, abandoning a little bit, it would have felt like a bit of waste of time anyway, but like really going almost to the goal. And it was perfect, because now that I didn't even care to be a journalist or anything, just to even get the degree, I just had to study whatever that was like a societal subject, you know. So I picked political science, and I barely had to be in school, like, because I didn't care to go or any of the, what do you call it, lectures, you know. I just went to anything that was like obligatory, like seminars, exams, you know. But then I could spend a lot of time just on my own process with training, diet, and learning about it. I've been like this, you know, like I talked about how I'm not good at just sitting in school and listening to someone bullshit about something I don't know why I am supposed to care about. I cannot see the value of it. But when I know, I can be the opposite, you know. So I would just watch so much fitness stuff, you know, and read. But key thing, because a lot of people do this, is that I was training at the same time and trying to figure it out and analyzing and observing my own process at the same time. I always say that should always combine theory with practice. Like rather practice more than you like read or listen, you know, take in about it. And I want to say that that's the same way I learned about poker. That was how I went balls deep into poker. I would find all the poker shows, notice quite quickly that most of the commentators were not really that good, you know. Found a few that actually had an analysis of the game, watched like everything they commented on. There was this poker philosopher, Phil Galfond. I managed to come across like an old torrent, you know, he had worked for this poker site, you know, had all this educational content. I would watch his videos like over and over and over again. I had like 40 1 hour long videos. I would just like go through them all like that. No, that was a side note. I did that kind of thing, but with fitness, and it's just like, which thing do I want to talk about here? But let's I guess, just to finish how I do with my life here, is that I can do this, I can finish the studies, right? Then for some time, I just have little like odd jobs, you know, part-time jobs, while I'm still training and focusing a lot on that. And it's like after a year that I start doing the YouTube channel, and you know, later there, 1.5 years in or so, that's when I start to study to become a PT. So about 2 years after starting training, I start working as a PT. I do that for a couple of years. I start doing some coaching with the like, you know, connected to my content, but for a very low price, like a hobby kind of thing first. Then I actually transition into doing that full time. And that's what I've been doing since then. I tried doing it because I can work from anywhere, right? I tried living in Greece for a year. I've come back. I might, you know, I have connections to Greece now. I've revisited, but I have not stayed there for a longer time. But that could happen again. But that basically what happened with my just life like that. And it's been a very positive journey since hitting rock bottom like that, right? But I want to talk about first my like journey with training, kind of what it looked like, and then just like I have with the other natural bodybuilder kind of guys, talk a little bit about my style and approach to training. Some things like common gym mistakes that I often ask people and stuff, that's like a video I can do separately for me, so I'll do it a little slightly different for myself with this. But so at home first, right? I first do this just negative pull-ups every other day. I know that push-ups was the first thing I added to that afterwards. And after some time, it was a little bit like I had some kind of workout A and B, you know. To just, I can't remember what exercise I did together exactly now, but to just I know that I did my pull-ups. That was like a main thing. And I realized that was some sort of compound I could do at home. I did push-ups. I know I did Bulgarian split squats. I had some adjustable dumbbells. I did some curls. I might have done some lateral raises. I think I might have tried to do like triceps kickbacks. I know I did some different like ab exercises. And then they improved it. Of course, right when I started going to the gym, they both built a good outdoor gym in my area, and they improved like the gym in the house I was living in, like got the barbell and bench and everything, But it was a gym that barely had anything, It was pretty much a treadmill, a few dumbbells, and then this bar that's not like, it's like a 5 kilo bar, and I think you could have 45 kilos on these tops. So something I actually started doing was squats. I remember I had to explosively like high pull this bar up to on a radiator, and then I had to go and slide on the radiator and get it to like drop down on my traps because I'm, maybe I could have like push pressed it. I don't know back then, but when you don't know your body, that was a solution I found. Then I wanted to start trying deadlifts. And I remember trying to make it heavier. There was a 20 kilo kettlebell too. So I put this like bar through it and then put the weights on the side. So now it was like the first decimeter was just 45 kilos. And then the kettlebell would clunk on, Did I just make that word up, clunk on? I guess it sounds kind of like that. But yeah, then it was 65 kilos for the rest of the range of motion. I would do like high reps on that. But then I spent all this time preparing for going to the gym. Funny thing is Athlean X was my favorite like fitness YouTuber when I started. And I think Jeff, like he's called Jeff Cavalier, I don't think he's like all bad. The thing about Jeff is he gives some very genuine, honest advice. Like when it's like, shortcut to abs, he will always mention that there is no shortcut, it's diet, and you have to live a certain way. Like he tells a lot of truths like that. But then it's just like fear-mongering over these like positions, internally rotated position, behind the neck stuff, all these things. He fear-mongers around this thing is killing your gains, when it's more like be aware of this, that this is a weaker position that could, if you aren't mindful, you could be injured. But now there's a lot of people, including me, think that these more exposed positions, being smart and lowering the weight and then getting stronger in those positions, that's actually what would prevent injury in the end. But since I now mentioned and started talking about Athlean X, I'll tell you a couple of things that I picked up from him that I actually think are really good. First of all, he actually preaches a lot of high training intensity, just the value of training to failure. So I learned that a lot. Yeah, I already kind of naturally thought like that. But yeah, he reinforced that in me. But then his gimmick thing he does when the markers, he paints the muscle and shows the fibers. Actually, great visualization to understand the function of the muscle, and the follow the fiber kind of thinking has made me understand. Like, okay, if I want to target a muscle, I have to watch where does they attach? Where does the muscle attach? Or what joints? What direction does the fiber run in? And then create the motion accordingly. That's something that's still a lot in my mindset. But pretty much, I prepared for doing a push-pull legs kind of split in the gym. And I started going after 5 months of training at home. So I had some kind of baseline level of fitness, but no access to gym equipment, right? Yet, right? Now when I mentioned that I did train to failure from quite early, I was so afraid because I think a lot of people are, that is it even working what I'm doing? But a lot of people just abandon it. I had come to a point now when I've hit rock bottom. I've so clearly seen that this thing, fitness, improves the way I feel. So I have to keep going. But now, of course, I started having some bodybuilding goals too. But, it feels like it's so difficult, So I just, a lot of people worry and struggle, and all the genetics, all the talk, So I just felt I have to train super, super, super hard. So in the beginning in the gym, it was like a majority of my sets were drop sets even, It's kind of funny. I trained way more intense than I had to. But what was good about that was when I realized that, hey, if I just take everything's to failure, and just the odd thing beyond maybe the last set, that's like enough. And that in comparison was like, just to failure instead of beyond failure. That's a breeze, you know. But yeah, I think I would go like 4 times per week, first in the gym, but rotate through a push-pull legs, you know. So I do each like 1.33 times per week, right? Probably do an odd extra workout here and there, and I just upped the frequency until I did push-pull legs, 2 of each per week. I know I've been cutting, and before going to the gym, I had eaten like a keto diet and just started walking a lot more. After a certain point, I counted calories even, and I managed to get like lean, but like probably like the current level of leanness I have or something. You know, it's hard to, it's not the best lighting here, but you know, I had abs that are like not super chiseled like this, and I was just a lot smaller muscularly. I know that like at the bottom of my cut there, before going to the gym, I weighed like 71.5 kilos or something. But then I started bulking instead. And of course, first my diet philosophy, like basically, it was more, my diet, it was more like mainstream fitness kind of thinking first, because I didn't know much, right? Like I'm a little fearful of red meat for like abstract reasons, like because you've just picked up, don't eat too much red meat, you know, which is something I changed my mind. I have also nuanced it a bit. I realized certain people, sometimes it doesn't work to eat too much red meat and saturated fat, but yeah, overall, I think you should have. It's a highly nutritious food, but yeah, chicken rice broccoli kind of style, you know, but also more like granola or oats, more shakes, and thinking I should eat so often, you know. Yeah, but I'm bulking and gained like 8 kilos. I think I went up to 80 and cut down, and I probably gained a few kilos of muscle, you know. And now, when I had gained some muscle and then cut down, it was like easier for me to get a bit lower, start to see actually some striations, more veininess and shit going on, right? But yeah, it's like I'm thinking, should I talk about just the training, just the diet and fasting? Then we're gonna come to talk for a long time, guys, just me. But yeah, I guess we'll just talk about it as it happens. That, you know, at a bit over like 15 months into this or something, I've been curious about many things, right, around health and fitness. You know, I've tried some cold plunging. I do the sauna a lot. Like, you know, I'm always thinking about like what things can I add to my regimen or try and that. And so fasting is something I've thought about, and I've done like, I have tried 16/8 kind of fasting then, but of course somehow squeezing 6 meals into this 8-hour eating window. But yeah, longer fast I've thought about. Then when I was still in the choir, actually this Canadian coach that when we went to choir beer afterwards, it could be interesting to talk a bit about how I stopped drinking and stuff too. Can't talk about everything, but you know, point is, I would go to these things, I would just drink way less. I still drank, it was still something I struggled a bit with, just with like food. Yeah, I eat better, well, I would struggle and be tempted and have something I'm like not supposed to have sometimes. But so I'm there, and I just heard him right then talk to someone else. It was like, when I'm fasting. And so after a while, I just asked him, like, why do you fast? And he said that, well, I think there are many health benefits to it, but when I was little, we were poor, and sometimes it was a strategy for us. And that kind of humbled me, because I had many things about my childhood were very difficult, traumatic, you know, but not ever in the material sense, you know, that I'm worried about food on the table or something. So I decided there and then that I had to fast just for that reason. And doing a little bit of research, coming up with that 5 days, that seems like a big challenge, but I shouldn't die from that. It's funny, I've noticed that how when I do things for the first time, I tend to overdo it way more compared to, like, because people come to me like, yeah, I tried a 24-hour fast. I'm like, so you mean you haven't eaten yet? You know, but 5 days immediately. And I learned about the salt water during the fast, and I drank like black coffee, and I had my snooze still, but nothing with calories in it like that. And so I had planned for this to just be a one-off fast. And I think fast, when you think of it as this thing I'm trying once, then it's not as difficult. Even if you feel a little hungry or something, you know that you're not supposed to eat. But then after this fast, you're going to go back to eating, you know. but I found the snake diet guy, during that fast, and I listened to him, learned quite a bit, just found him hilarious too. But yeah, that made me like just curious about the fasting. So I wanted to try more. And at around this point, by the way, I should say that I have, listened a lot to kind of carnivore kinds of people. And I'm not sold that humans are like actual carnivores supposed to eat just meat. But I started to see the actual facts of the thing that, animal foods are highly nutritious. So I'm now eating more foods. But there were some, I had a little bit of, even if I didn't think that I should be completely carnivore, it was like I was a bit carbophobic from the fasting. It's kind of strange when you follow like a fasting guy like that, Cole, that has a lot of knowledge. He's himself, that was interesting to me, that he's not just some hippie guy. He's like actually really strong power lifter kind of guy. But he's talking a lot to obese people, and then maybe he talks about carbs, so that I get a little scared of carbs, but maybe someone like me doesn't really. So I remember I didn't really eat like low carb, like keto, but like very, like for someone at my fitness level, activity level, quite low carb, moderate carb or something. But yeah, around this point I realized that red meat is the shit. But I tried many different fasts, okay? And that's what I mean now, that some 48-hour fasts were like more difficult, because now it felt like this thing that I'm supposed to do over and over again, and fuck, it's tough now, I broke a few of them early, but generally I have not broken many fasts that I've started early. So I tried some 48 separately like that. I tried doing OMAD in the morning, so 1 meal a day, eating only in the morning. I remember I got quite ripped from that. I ate so much food at the start of the day. I went back to sleep because it was so much. Then I would go and train full body. It was also an influence from Cole. I like trained full body every day for a while. I don't think it was too efficient for me, because I probably overtrained and underate for a bit. I tried alternate day fasting, so eating every other day. I thought it was like genius. Instead of the 16-8, the 40-8, And the way I was thinking about it, this kind of hack, like on the day I eat, I can eat like in a surplus, and then I just fast it away the next day. I've since come to realize that you can combine some kind of scheduled fasting and make some training progress, but the more advanced you get, the more difficult that's going to be, and you can't do it too frequently, So the alternate day fasting like that, I think, like already at the intermediate stage of like bodybuilding, I think it's going to be quite hard to actually gain muscle on a routine like that. Like hold on to the muscle, sure. I don't like alternate day fasting, honestly. It's like isolating the worst part of a fast. I have to go through it over and over again. I prefer to just fast longer and have more days of not fasting in between then. But I tried that. I did a 72-hour fast for like fasting challenge with some. I tried a 3-day dry fast, which was crazy to me, because I thought you died from 3 days of not drinking. I did that, and it was like a dopamine fast, no nicotine and no caffeine. And I remember how I used the sauna so much. I went out by myself on this island, and it was crazy to me. Even like that, when I was breaking the fast, I had coconut water that I had never tasted at that point. And, it's a little special taste. I like it now. But when I didn't know what to expect, and I have not been drinking for 3 days, and I've been sitting so much in the sauna, still my instinct was that I wanted to spit this out because it was icky. But I was recording, that's still on the YouTube channel, Breaking 3-Day Dry Fast or something it's called. So I had to pretend for the camera like, oh man, I remember I got so high after that. Like literally, it felt like MDMA almost, the feeling afterwards. But the fasting, I guess, because I don't want to spend too much more time on it here, because I can do videos about fasting all the time. But it is like it is one of the things I'd like to influence. It's interesting for someone like me, because it's quite an unusual thing to do, prolonged fasting, literally not eating anything for several days. But even more so for people that are into building muscle, because especially enhanced guys, but anyone that cares about putting on muscle is going to be like afraid of muscle loss and often of not eating then, So like it's interesting for me because when you come upon something like fasting first, you can kind of feel like, oh, it's like a miracle. It helps for everything, you know. Then in my case, I got a more nuanced view, and it's like for myself, I find fasting kind of, you know, not so exciting. It's like, you know, the training part for it is so much more fun to get all nerdy about. It's something you do. It's like the skill, and yeah, fasting. I talk about that. You can get better at fasting. It gets easier, but it's just when you can do it, it's not so interesting, you know. It's like it's just a tool that I really like for certain things, and it makes me feel really good for certain things, you know. But it's not super exciting. But that's something I'd like to influence the natural bodybuilding community with a bit, because it is really good. Like if I'm just to talk about briefly, like weight loss, obviously. Of course, it's the fastest way to lose weight, and you don't even have to rely on it as your only way of losing weight. This is something I said somewhere recently, that I think all natural bodybuilders could, like for instance, at the start of a cut, do a long fast to kind of kickstart that fat loss, you know, and then you could go on to do a daily deficit. But like, do you understand that you can literally like get in with a 5-day fast? You could get in like the weight loss you'd get in a month from something like that, you know. So obviously it's a nice kickstart, but it's going to be amazing for food addiction, and just even if we don't think of it as food addiction, because it's a little, you know, varying degrees of that, and it's interesting with something like food because we're going to need food to survive in the end, you know. But what I mean is, because I never really, even if I ate a bunch of junk food, you know, and I had some cravings, and you know, when I changed my lifestyle, I wasn't a huge food addict. It was not my go-to to feel better or something. But what I just noticed is, like, kind of no matter who you are, doing lots, like getting mileage with doing longer fasts and refeeds on clean whole foods, it just makes everything that comes to like has to do with insulin and blood sugar so stable, and it makes it so that, you know, you have this suddenly this high definition experience of food. Like we don't think of it that way, but if you think of food as a drug, it is a lot with all the hyper processed food like that really can exploit, you know, because certain foods are supposed to taste good to us because we want them, right? It's a signal that we want them. And this is something with balance. When we now take these things, like, and make something like a Snickers, you know, we can just exploit. Oh, it's sweet, it's salty, it's crunchy, you know. Now it can feel, now it tastes good, but it doesn't mean that it is good for you. But having access to all these things and been eating them throughout your life, you know, it's a little bit like having started with a mild drug and upped your dose or went on to stronger compounds. And now if you took the first dose or the first drug, you wouldn't feel anything. Like with food, it's of course not anything, but maybe it's like this is boring food, you know. That's something I noticed, that not just when breaking the fast, but when you really scrub out, you know, the dopamine receptors connected to taste when you fast, and you don't overwrite them when you don't bring back junk food immediately again, you know. So I compare it a lot with the way the experience is just like everything is not sharp now, and now it's like, wow, I see everything. It's kind of the same with the taste. So, you know, it's going to make it so much easier to adhere to a clean diet. Like now, do you understand? I'm the guy now that's like, okay, I guess I have to eat chocolate because I have such high metabolism, and it's so hard to bulk and gain weight at this point if I don't eat anything like that at all. But I don't ever like crave, oh, I want chocolate so much, you know. So for a long time, I felt like when it comes to especially the worst kinds of food, there are certain things like deep fried things in like seed oils. It's like, there'll be very few times I make an exception and eat that. But it becomes like, I literally don't want to. I do not have to use any willpower. Everything I eat tastes great to me, all the healthy food. So why would I poison myself with this? But also hunger. It's just not as big of an issue, you know. Like, I don't get hungry as easily, and if I actually feel I'm hungry, it's more just like, that's information, you know. I know what that means, you know. Oh, my body, it's asking for energy. Well, I can't eat right now. That's fine, you know. It's not a big deal, you know. Then it's just, apart from natural bodybuilders, like, it is a cleanse, of course, in the physical sense, that you give the digestive system a break, and tons of these cleansing processes happen, like the autophagy when the process when the body recycles old damaged cells, which does not just happen from fasting, but it's especially like from the third day of a fast. It's something it's turned up a lot, you know. So it's that physical cleanse. And autophagy stuff, you'll notice that, especially if you do dry fast or something, or if you do regular fast and you use the sauna and stuff, like afterwards, you're gonna feel like, okay, all the dead skin cells are gone. My skin is so smooth, you know. But even spiritually and mentally, like this is the last thing I'll say for now. But, you know, when you're a modern human being, and you live in this, like I say, you can take survival for granted, food and warmth and all that. And you all these impressions, all this stimulation from, you know, whether that's caffeine, like stuff like that, but watching screens all the time and being around loud noises, looking at screens, getting, you know, both the messages from what you're watching, but the actual light, like, you know, and you're overstimulated. And so fasting, just like living in a city and going to the nature, you know, like just like taking in stuff all the time, just taking a break from that, it cleanses you in that sense. But even the way I talk about just perspective and contrast, that we have certain abstract or maybe minor things that feel big to us in our current circumstance. If you're stressed about your job or relationships or where I don't really know how this thing in my life is going, right? Whatever it is, you know, when you haven't eaten for a few days, you just look at it in a different way, you know, like your priorities have changed, you know. And I notice, like, well, I'll say as an example of this, I notice how I can end up being like rude to people when I'm fasted, because it's like, it's not like I'm irritated, but it's also I don't have time for your bullshit right now, and I don't have time to play the social game because I haven't eaten in a few days, and you're blah 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 yapping about, you know. So of course you have to be mindful about a thing like that. I had to excuse myself, like, sorry if I seem dismissive. It's just this fasted state, you know. But what I mean is that kind of effect is still good for you, that you sometimes you care too much about things, and a thing like fasting can just give you a complete break from that. So, man, 2 hours almost. The thing is, I figured also for this is that, you know, I know a lot of you guys will have had some Christmas things and then maybe a little bit of time off, you know, in the middle days, as we say in Sweden. So I figured, why not go quite long? That's why I let myself go quite deep into certain things, you know. So you have some entertainment, you that actually like listening to me speak like this. Well, let's see. I'm just looking at the time I have left too. Let's talk a bit about spirituality, belief in God, okay? And then I want to talk a bit about alchemy, actually. To me, these are very related, okay? But I want to talk a bit about my spirituality and belief in God. And I always find this subject a little strange because it's like I don't know quite where to start, because I feel like there are certain things about God and spirituality, the nature of our existence, that I just know, you know. Not because someone told me or anything, but through my experience, right? But I also don't want to claim to be some kind of prophet or guru, or that I have the answers, you know, because that's exactly why I am a spiritual person but not a religious person, because I know no religion has all the answers, you know, just like I definitely don't have all the answers. But this is also something I like to talk about, like that's something I'm huge on, the importance of, you know, trusting your own experience, but really observing your experience, you know. We have to act and live as if you know, if someone tells you something, many times you have to act as if it's true, or you can choose to believe something for now, but when you think of it, you don't truly know anything that you haven't like directly experienced for yourself. And I'm huge on because we're so taught in this society to just listen and take in and follow rules, you know. But when you just realize that I have a machine that's sort of designed to tell me a lot of things. But when you really observe and listen, you know, introspect on these things, you get access to so much like wisdom, you know. So my spirituality is kind of interesting that Yeah, that I feel like I know quite a bit, but I also don't want to come off or pretend as if I'm like, look, I have the answers. I'm also a Jesus here, you know. But I guess I just want to present my views, okay? So I noticed, like I mentioned earlier in this episode, that man, I just see all the things that I'd like to talk about that we're not gonna have time to get into. But I'd always been hardcore atheist for, you know, Christopher Hitchens atheist, Richard Dawkins kind of atheist. I do not have feel like Richard Dawkins all that much right now, but you know, that's the way I always looked at it. You know, show me the evidence, show me the proof. You know, something I've come to say since is that atheists don't see the forest because the trees are in the way. You know, that's how I view it now. But I noticed, going through all the panic attack experience and that, I noticed a presence inside me, you know, that it's hard now to know where to start, because it's like what I notice now, it's like I understand it better. What I noticed then, I understand better now. But I noticed something was different. Like the voice inside just started sounding different from me, and it was like it was room to notice this thing that we're looking for out here all the time, that was literally how should I say it, the thing you were looking for is the thing that's looking, okay? Think about that for a second. When you're looking for God, you know, it's meta. You're actually looking, that thing that is looking, that is noticing, experiencing the looking. That's what you're looking for, you know. But I didn't quite notice it right then. I just noticed there was some kind of shift. What I've come to realize since is that, you know, our little ego voice, our thoughts and that, they might seem like they're completely our own and that, but so much of it is just conditioning from things you've been told or just due to your experiences, you know. Traumatic experiences you've had, for instance, and the stories you made up about it afterwards, and that. The point is, the whole discussion going on inside there, you're really just the one observing it. But I had a traumatic childhood. It just was the case. I experienced intensity in anxiety and depression and violence and unsafety for so long in my childhood, right? So point is, I had a big wounded ass ego, lots of trauma like that. But going through, I didn't realize that at the time, but going through the panic attack thing, that's kind of funny how we can sometimes heal from things without understanding exactly what happened. Because of course I realize now that I did not back then, that I had this fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. I'm afraid of expressing certain parts of myself, but like completely authentically, because I'm afraid that I'll be rejected and abandoned. You know, I think it's safer to shove it away, and I try to tell a certain story about myself. All these things, right? Well, so when I just have to face this fear of judgment with the panic that I feel so many times, apart from just being horrendous experience, feeling like I'm making such a complete fool out of myself in front of people, and I have to let people down by saying, no, I have panic attacks, I can't come and do, I'm sorry, I have to cancel, I have panic attacks, you know. That I go through this and show myself how capable I am, first of all, that I could overcome such intense fear, feeling so scared and doing things, but also just proving all these beliefs and stories about myself that I just wrong. So it's like a sort of ego death that I have experienced many times since then, actually, on different levels, you know. But what I mean is that I shed a lot of trauma and conditioning and wounding at the same time. Now there was space to notice God, okay? But I did not quite understand that it was God first. But I listened to this YouTuber, Jesse Lee Peterson. Some people might know him. There's actually I called into his show once. There's a clip on his channel from when I did that. But I had actually seen him before. You know, I mentioned having been alt-right and stuff. And I noticed too, by the way, because when you become hateful alt-right, I'm not saying just have right-wing opinions, but when you're really so emotionally invested in all of that, you know, it's a projection. Like the chaos and things you don't like inside yourself, you find something outside of you to blame, right? Well, and so I had noticed that I started caring, like not changing all my opinions factually, like some change it because you can just see clearly when you're not so emotional about it, but not everything like that. But I just noticed like this need to sleep with the girls that I talked about was really, I did it a few times by habit. I became a volcel later. We'll see if I have time to go into that here. But that was gone, and I just the animosity towards like women, immigrants, different groups. Again, maybe I haven't changed all my opinions on certain things around it, but I just don't feel all of this. But so Jesse is someone that he's kind of alternative, but he's a black guy, and he's definitely not like a Nazi or something. But I had seen him. And I just not quite understood what he talked about sometimes. And suddenly, when he talked about God and all kinds of things, I just felt like, I understand what he's talking about now. And he talks a lot about the ego and trauma. And he's big on forgiving your parents and that. And he's actually the one that opened my eyes up to that there was forgiving to do, to both my parents, but especially my mother, which Jesse is also big on. Forgive your mother, especially. Yeah, and I had that phase when I first was very angry when I realized, these things that I always thought were part of me, that I now overcame. They came from my experience in childhood. You get angry first, But something I picked up on was that Jesse calls himself a Christian, but he's very much not the typical Christian. You can see that he has some things that he knows for himself just through his experience too. And many of the concepts he talks about, it's like more close to Buddhism in a sense. So while he chooses to do the Christian thing, I was like, I call myself a Christian a little bit, but it always felt strange, because I still had this feeling like, but, the Bible and all the history, like Jesus, it's like, yeah, I can see how Jesus can be like, but I have no proof, that Jesus existed, even if I can like see the stories and we can learn some things from them, So I had this feeling that I don't think it's really about religion. I don't think actually it's a true religion. And believe me, guys, I wish it was. Because that's one thing I definitely would only have to gain on being like populist and being like, Christian guy, And I hate, not letting down, but disappointing, I guess, certain Christians. But I'm sorry, no offense, that this is not all, But in my view, thinking that there's like this one right religion is childish, and seeing Jesus, as worshipping Jesus. I feel like you have not gotten it right at all. Thinking that Jesus is God, I think Jesus, you should be more like Jesus, not worship him. I wonder what Jesus would think if he knew. I guess he does. But how does Jesus feel about his birthday supposedly being now this highlight of consumerism, meaningless materialism, just buying a bunch of crap for the sake of it, and that people worship him. I think he just wanted you to follow his example, But so the rest, it has become gradually clearer to me, is what I feel, and I cannot say there's many things that I like know. Because now I don't just mean about spirituality, like even about dieting and stuff. Like I just don't know where I heard, like saw, got the first piece of information to follow, to begin with. So I know some of the ideas, like the ways I would word it. I know I picked up from places, but I'm like this, guys. That I'm. People love. And it's not bad to educate yourself and take in information from the outside, but I'm so big on not just doing the thing, but even the theory. I like to come up with a theory myself, and for me it's almost never I read something and therefore I believe it. It's more like, yes, I'm seeing something here I see that they're talking about something I've already kind of started seeing. Now maybe reading this person's take on it, maybe it would expand, but it's something I have to find it for myself first, So, the way I see it with our universe here is that the universe is a universe of oneness turned inside out almost. Like everything is one, that common hippie talking about, we're all one, man. It's true, but there needs to be, at the same time, while everything comes from the same source, is really the same source, there has to be this perceived separation in order to just have this experience. And like why or something I cannot experience, but it seems to me like the universe just was bored. It was too boring to just be like love complete. Let's divide myself into everything and the polar opposite of it, to like get to know every little aspect of myself from every angle. I think just like I'm a nerd with alchemy and finding out what makes up an individual, and that I think the one is the same, that it has created this to just learn, have certain experiences, grow, expand, understand even more. And these are things, it's like, why do I think that? How do you believe that? It's like, it's hard to, it's like, I feel like it comes straight from the source, I've spent so much time meditating on these things, pondering these things, and certain things that's just the way I view it now, So, the way I see it, I talk about the trinity. The trinity is, funnily enough, it's one of the things that Christianity gets like most criticized for, and certain, fractions of Christianity, they don't really buy into it and that. But I feel like that's one of the things it gets most right. It's just I view it a little bit different. Because, listen, I'm a non-dualist, right? Meaning that the funny thing is that there is a thing such as good and bad, but there also isn't, because everything, it just is, But it's true that, like, just practically for us, like, no, that one's bad, take that one, that one's good. If I'm telling you about some equipment you should use for whatever, like, we have to practically use this. And also, like, we can have a preference. It's like, okay that you enjoy having fun more than feeling pain, but it's like, why it does exist and doesn't exist is that one cannot exist without the other, right? You cannot feel good if you cannot feel bad, right? There has to be that contrast, and then you just embrace that maybe you try to suffer as little, reduce suffering for yourself and others, but you still embrace that that's part of it, because you just know that, right? To rise up, you have to be able to fall. In order for there to be light, it has to be dark, and so on. But so one thing, when it comes to us human beings, there's a separation between us, and we're all one at the same time, right? And so the way I see it is that the consciousness, that I believe to be the same in all of us. It's just that however that works, but being connected into this one human ego, it's like certain things, you have local access to the experience going on within just one person, There's some kind of separate aspect like that there just has to be. But I believe that consciousness, the being, Moses, when he had received the stone tablets from God, was like, who should I tell you that you are? He said, like, tell them that I am, I am being itself, right? And so the being, the one, the experiencer, the observer, I think it's the same inside all of us. It's just that when it is connected into this little human ego, and that there will be a separate experience, But so what you want to do, then we're talking about alchemy too, I guess we're transitioning smoothly into this, but you want to figure out your individual vessel as much as possible. That of course, I'm going to feel and act as if I'm Theodore and identify with the ego of Theodore, especially when I'm autopiloting at certain times. But many times, I don't even see myself as I'm Theo. Theo is just my ride. He's just my guy. I just happen to have local access about more Theo, but just like if you're sitting here and talking to me, I'm just experiencing the sounds and the visual, the movements of your mouth, and I'm just experiencing it. It's the same thing with Theo. I'm just experiencing, and then you get, of course, someone can tell me what they're thinking, but I cannot directly experience their thoughts. That I can just do with my individual vessel, right? So the point with this, so the Trinity, the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. I think the Father is that consciousness, and the Son is this unique, separate aspect, right? the individual, the human being, the separate one. And then I think the Holy Spirit is when you find perfect alignment between these two. What I mean by that is because, you know, on the one hand, you want to detach from your ego as much as possible. But it's kind of like, you know, if you enter different cars, you cannot drive them the exact same way, right? Like you have to have the car's function in mind. So it's kind of the same way that even when you detach from yourself and all the stories you tell yourself about your pains or why I'm so unlucky or why I'll never have the, you know, whatever, when you just see that that's just programming in your separate thing, you know, like you just identify with these things as little as possible. Just observe these thoughts and feelings going on inside of you. Still though, again, you're bound to this one individual, so you have to kind of dance with yours, you know. So while I say I don't identify so much with my ego most of the times, and Theo thinks of it this way a lot of the time. Theo just says I for the sake of convenience and not coming off crazy. Really, Theo is talking about Theo as if he was talking about anyone else, you know. So, but it's, you know, I look a certain way, I have certain traits, I know Theo is good at certain things. So the kind of character that I play, you know, not play as completely make up, you know, but you want to find that alignment when you're completely allowing your vessel to be what it's supposed to be and flourish at what it's good at, you know, while being detached enough, you know, to be connected to the all, you know. Like it's getting probably really hippie-like and strange for some people, you know. I guess we start moving on from that, but that's a big practice it's been for me. Become the observer as much as possible. Remind yourself, come back to consciousness. When Theo is freaking out for whatever reason, you know, stressed about life, anxious about this and that, sad about the girl, stressed about work, whatever it is, you know, come back to being the observer and just like, yes, Theo has to be a little sad right now, or Theo is a little stressed right now. Oh, we need to calm down Theo a little bit. That's how I look at things. But so here next, yeah, I'm gonna try to keep this one under 3 hours. I'll actually have to go before then, I realize. But yeah, alchemy. You know, the alchemy, I'm not gonna have time to talk about it as much as I want to now. But, well, pretty much, you know, I've gone back a lot and figured out like what made me, because that's what I saw, you know, that when I went through the panic attacks, so both that experience in and of itself, but then when I started doing this introspective journey, realizing that many things I thought, that's just part of me, like it's my DNA. So no, that's my programming, wounding, trauma. You know, I like to say programming when we keep it a bit more neutral and not just talk about the most painful things, you know. But then I realized that, you know, I ended up a certain way because of certain experiences, and now I've ended up a certain way because of certain experiences. That both means that I can, you know, if I want to end up a certain way, I could figure out what experiences would lead to that. But also certain traits that I picked up that were like trauma, that were like coping mechanisms that have become like a problem for me at times, you know, because that's what's happened. Strategies you have like really just to survive and to feel loved as a child. You know, they serve the purpose to begin with. That's also a way to forgive yourself for your like insecurities and weaknesses. When you see that it's really a child trying to feel loved and survive, then you can treat yourself with a bit more compassion, you know. But of course they were effective, as in they made you survive first, but the problem is when we're an adult and we want to do more than survive, we want to thrive, but we have these coping mechanisms that no longer serve us at all, you know. But like I mentioned earlier again, is that all strengths, all exceptional traits, they are the other side of the coin of these kinds of things, you know. So, you know, I know I just wrote some down here just to not sit here and not come up with something. But for instance, you can have too much empathy, you know. So you become a people pleaser. You sacrifice yourself. You know, you feel like you have to need or please other people, be there for them, help them. It can take many different shapes and forms, right? Yeah, and so at the expense of yourself, you know, because empathy, it can be a good thing. Yeah, but that was I wanted to say is the upside, because now I talk about sort of the what many people identify as an empath, the problems associated with that, right? But that when you can learn to have boundaries and tame that, now you're gonna have great intuition. You're gonna understand people a lot better because you easily attune to people. So you can sometimes without almost logic just intuitively understand people better because you have this trait, right? And of course, empathy, it's with everything. There's going to be sweet. You have to look out for yourself, but then, of course, it's good to be able to relate to and want to be there for others. It's an extremely Chad alpha trait, honestly. And if you're sensitive, so someone like me, that in my, I'm probably also born quite sensitive, but it's a very violent home, right? And I have to learn to pick up on little signals, what things could trigger, like my brother and my mom, she would also explode, be angry, and always be on my toes like that. What that does is that you become very sensitive, both to changes within yourself, but also in your environment, and what that can make it is that, you're easily overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, you're sensitive literally to noises and sounds, but also if you've been hurt a lot, in many ways, again, I don't hold anything against my parents, and I just get annoyed that when I want to bring something up, I'd like to elaborate on it, but we don't have all the time in the world now. But I was hurt by my mom, especially a lot, by certain things she told me I was not good at, and things, and things like that. For instance, when you're sensitive, maybe that's something interesting I've noticed, like now when I'm a much more healed and complete individual, the way I see it, for some of us, I don't think life is easy for anyone, but I think we've been dealt different levels of difficulty, and that's the two sides of the coin again. Those that experience the most difficulty are those that has the greatest potential to experience more of the opposite. Where was I going exactly now? Yes, this is the point, that now when I mostly feel secure, right, that I actually broken free in many ways that many have not, I don't feel like society's all the ideals and expectations from society, that I live under this change. I very much live my life on my own terms, but just think of an athlete that's amazing at their sport, but they might have hurt something. There are many injuries, they always have, but they might be able to do something so that they can perform again as good as if they don't injure, but they keep ripping up the same thing again, right? Because that area is sensitive. You see, the same thing with someone like me. I notice that mostly I feel very secure. People can think whatever the fuck they want about me and stuff, But I notice that you have your weak spots, and also when you are overwhelmed, again, we talked about bandwidth and stuff, then being a sensitive person, then I can suddenly be take specific things someone said, you definitely attacked me now, but so the upside to being, the sensitive, that's what I mean, that you could be too reactive, or that things that, it's just bothersome that certain things affect you much. And now I don't mean so much that the insult or something, but for instance, sounds. I can be very sensitive to sounds and I get angry, But you're also perceptive. You pick up on things, right? You notice things because you have this sensitivity. So especially when you're in a good state and you built yourself up with good habits, in these kinds of states, the sensitivity is a superpower. But I feel like that. Being sensitive, sometimes I just feel like I get to... I feel like I'm so... just aware of what's going on, in charge in a sense, just knowing so much, but definitely at times still, I'm it's I know that things are just intense for me, But, and for instance, I put many things here. I of course also, from my childhood, felt like I need to be more. I've noticed that I noticed I'm smart early, but also I have this situation with my brother, and just I have to be able to take more. I have to be able to perform more, and so having this high standard and expectation on yourself that can make you suffer a lot. A lot of people will know that you beat yourself up, something insane from within, But also that, because I notice how some people just don't have it in them, that they want to be really great at something, because that's what when I got into natural bodybuilding, for instance, now when I'm into it, it's I have to be of course, because it's not entirely objective, but I have to be the best. Like what I do, uncommon sense, holistic bodybuilding. That's, the alchemy process is a lot. Let me elaborate a bit on that soon. But the point is, like, I have this, like, I need to get I need to get as good as I can, and that makes it so sometimes that I don't feel proud or don't appreciate or don't give myself credit when I should, But it also makes it so that I push myself very hard. And I say this is, again, with certain things, like with my physique now, for instance, I don't feel like it's too bad in any sense that, it's not good and it's not good yet. I'm super proud and happy, but I still have in it that I want it to be better, So you see, all these things, when you understand where it come from, and see the two sides of the coins, and you can kind of start working on the area where it's troublesome and start seeing where, it brings you value. You can, it's about taming your demons is the way I talk about it. You have demons. We call them that because they do haunt you. They do torment you to some extent. But demons, they have powers, So if you can tame them, and I say tame, like, because sometimes it's like slaughter demon, make them my bitch. I've thought about it like that. But the so-called demons, they're actually things like, they are really like scared parts of your child self, So that's why I don't like to think of it so much as like killing them anymore. It's like you're taming them, okay? You're making them, you're in charge. You're using their powers for your own good. You give them understanding and compassion, You're like, but now, because you're here still though, I'm going to have to make you work for me a bit more now, okay? What you did when I was a kid, for some, that worked then, but now we're going to do things differently, But the point is this sort of thinking, I guess, because I'm going to have to, definitely going to have you back on the show in the future. But I guess this, because we've been talking about spirituality, alchemy, holistic bodybuilding, I mentioned, and that's how it kind of comes together in a sense. You can round off with that. I guess I never talked about my exact training style. I'll do that briefly at the end too. But holistic bodybuilding, I ended up seeing this about myself after the panic attacks, that many things that I thought was me, there was just my current alchemy, it wasn't, that's not who I am, that's how I currently function, is a more proper way to say it, And then I started training and I saw this, that, if I am someone that leans into discomfort, the right kind, I get all these, I gain a lot of, I become stronger, I become more secure and calm. If I put myself through stress, self-imposed adversity would be training, but, cold plunges, fasting, all these things are stressors at different intensities, right? Like it strengthens me in different ways, but it also makes, when I go through that intensity, now I feel calmer and better at other times, So I started seeing that, like if I want to be a calm, strong person, what do I have to do, But it's also, when, you think of it in different directions, like also, when because I started training purely for my well-being, right? But then I realized I have these bodybuilding goals, and I actually want to take it far. I'm visualizing this ripped look in my head, right? It's just that this always came second to health, That's also why I never truly you're tempted, you're curious about steroids at some point. If you're gonna think about it at some point, but I just never truly thought about it because health was at the top. But when I started thinking like, in a year, I'd like to be kind of ripped, is the way I think of it. The way I visualize that is pretty much like muscle, some muscle on my entire frame, abs, some muscle striations, a bicep vein, a shoulder vein, something like that, right? Then you start thinking, well, what does a person that looks that way do, Because I started seeing, because I didn't start to train for looks, I started to train to take good care of myself, and I started appreciating myself for the discipline, that I didn't feel like it, but I did it anyway, I made these efforts to buy and cook food more and all that stuff, And I started seeing so much, because I didn't chase a look, but I started looking better. I was like, you're not really just looking a certain way, you are a certain way. The way you look is an expression of just who you are. The external is a manifestation of the internal, So I started thinking of it in these ways, like both going back and seeing what my alchemy that led to this. Okay, so what the building blocks I have now, how can I build something better out of that? Making certain weaknesses, former coping mechanisms into actual strengths, taming their demons, and using the powers for things that we want instead. Both that, but also thinking ahead. Like, if I want to become more like that, what experience, what alchemy, what ingredients would lead to that? I have in my training book, I have a section on that too. Like, consider that. Consider the person you want to become. If you want to look a certain way, how is that? Who is that person? What do they do? Why and how did they become that way? And this is thing they probably prioritize purpose over pleasure. They probably had to be fine with being bored sometimes. There are many things like this, right? But so this, of course, I could get more deep into it. But to summarize what like holistic bodybuilding really is, before I just talk about my actual just bodybuilding training, before we round off here, is it's using, because what I like about the bodybuilding, of course, physical just fitness and health is important for you, well-being and all that, being your best self. But specifically this visual change that you go through, it's so clear that your hard work is paying off. Something is becoming better. You can literally see the change. And it is this thing, you have to become better. You cannot do the same thing every day, and this leads to the result. You have to do a little more, get a little better at all times. And so the way I see it is that, because I am a huge training nerd, I love it, but I've always felt like it's just an important cornerstone of everything I do. And that's why I've chosen to call it like uncommon sense, and that I knew it was some kind of philosophy, something I didn't know even the word holistic then, right? But so the point is that we have this bodybuilding process, because we see that just going through the bodybuilding process that really teaches you that who you are it's the sum of your actions and behaviors over time. That if you want to have a certain result, you have to literally be a certain way. And many of the traits we pick up from becoming, you have to be intentional with your diet, your eating. You cannot just eat whatever you feel like. And you have to plan ahead. You have to have solutions for different. And with training, you have to understand the body well, but you have to be able to push yourself hard and be disciplined with technique and the consistency with going to the gym. When you're sore and tired and all this shit. Like being able to do all these things, that's going to gain you traits like I become stronger and more confident and everything in my life in situations that had nothing to do with training. Even when I don't know, it's not like on display, my physique. I just, I am a certain way. I can, because of so many things I've done when it comes to physical training, but fasting, cold plunging and that, I just know that I can handle almost any stressful situation. I might feel the stress, but I've alchemized both my body so that I actually get smaller stress responses from certain things, but also that when I am very stressed, I am just more in charge. I am more that observer that responds instead of reacts to different things. And you see how it goes. When you are not identified with your ego, you're often in a state of detachment. That's when you have that space, when you're triggered to respond instead. Not all the time, but more often, because you're never God, right? You're never fully there, but you're striving to be in the alignment with the Holy Spirit, if you want to, at all times, right? But also, it's both that the actual training, bodybuilding process, when you go about it in the right way, it's also your focus and mindset. You have to, the gym cell phase you can definitely end up in. And I say, because of the way everything happened to me, I've never been a complete like gym cell, but there have been times when I focused and prioritized it a bit too much, right? But you see that you both get good traits that will help you in many good ways from the bodybuilding, but the process being more clear. Like I said, that this physique result, it really is the sum of my action, the way I've been eating, the way I've been moving, the way I've been pushing forward, my consistency in this, now you can start thinking about other things, like if you want to be, there's something else you want to change about yourself, a certain trait, I'd like to be, I just made up something now, okay? I'd like to be a YouTuber, okay? and I feel like it's so weird to talk to the camera. I don't know exactly this and this and that. You see it's the same thing though, that, okay, you have to feel a little weird, a little awkward, maybe a little afraid of judgment when you put out the video and that, but it's still like, okay, I have to do the thing. I have to be consistent. I have to progressively overload by, doing longer videos if I have a certain goal, So it's both that the bodybuilding process in and of itself alchemizes you in a way that's going to benefit you in many other places, but also having this very clear process that's seeing that, increasing the weights, eating the right protein, blah, 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 that actually produces this kind of result. You're going to see how anything else that isn't as clear on the paper, that you're not adding weight to a bar, literally numbers like that, but you can see the whole process of how it works, and that's why it's holistic bodybuilding. And then I love bodybuilding. We're going to talk a bit about my training style now too, but for me it's part of the bigger body, mind and soul thing, and that's why last thing there, training to failure. I think it's efficient for muscle growth, but for me it's part of the alchemical process again. I want to be a person that I can push myself as hard as I can, I can push myself as hard as I can. The point is, I want to literally, just from the what I can physically do, what I'm physically capable of, I want to be able to just... Willpower should never be an issue. If it's just intensity, and if I just have to push through with willpower, that's something I want to be able to do, And so that's something you get from that. But so, if you talk about my training style, I'm just going to summarize it a little bit now. It's like, I just want to see, okay. We're talking about my actual training style, okay. It's a sort of power building. People have different definitions. Some it's really like you're a power lifter and then kind of fill in the blanks outside of the big three with like other exercises. The way I see it is just that, I like to get stronger on big movements too, but I am a bodybuilder. So do you see what I mean? That I might like to do squats and deadlifts, but maybe I enjoy increasing my strength, and even not just as a means of building muscle, but maybe I enjoy more doing a front squat when I go deep, ass to grass, and explode up with a completely upright posture, and maybe I care more about the weight I can do that for 10 reps with, more than when I can put it like in a low bar position and just kind of hip hinge just to below parallel and get up again. You see, I very much like big movements and getting stronger, but 1 rep max strength, that is fun sometimes and on certain exercises more than others. But for me, it's more like, I like more variations of these big movements, and get in some weighted chin-ups and stuff there, please, if we're talking to the power lifters, Yeah, like I like to get stronger, but not necessarily only 1 rep maxes and many different variations of these. And of course, the compound exercises, they're all, the way I see it, they are always the meat and potatoes for us, right? That's always where we get the most of our gains. But then especially beyond the intermediate stage, when we want to fill in the blanks and really fine polish the physique, it's going to be the isolations that do that. So I see that as like the kind of seasoning or vegetables on the side. Pickled vegetables, yeah, but so I guess I wanted to talk. I've talked for so long, but I wanted to talk a bit more about my actual training journey, just how my training changed. Well, basically, we can say this, that I had this approach that I'm telling you about now early. I just knew less, and so while I had this health focus too, and when I want to build muscle and get stronger, just the way I trained, it made it so like, I'm going to look good, I'm going to be strong, I'm going to have good energy, I'm going to get all those kinds of good results from the training. But I trained in like a bit too short range of motion without like exaggerating it. I just ended up getting really stiff. So there was a time when I hired my friend as a mobility coach, and focusing a lot, just letting the strength be on the back burner for like 3 months. Doing like mostly mobility focus, and then from that I just learned that there's such a thing as strength hypertrophy work and mobility work, people often think of it as a completely different, but there's something in the middle too. So I just changed. This is when I started. I mean, that was also a journey. I had to improve my ability to be able to squat as to grass. But that's when I, instead of going to just kind of parallel, I started to go deeper, you know. And I started doing like really, really deep dips and often like dead hang chin-ups. And I like to emphasize the stretch position of a lift. And I notice now that it's been all the rage with the lengthened partials and stretch-mediated hypertrophy. And you know, it's a little overhyped. It's not that you have everything you do has to be that, but it is efficient often for hypertrophy to so muscle growth. Emphasize that stretched position, but also it is one of those like little like hacks, like almost too good to be true sometimes. That certain exercises, if you emphasize the stretch position and train hard, you know, not only will you build muscle, but you will actually improve your mobility, like shoulder mobility. Like, of course, just because that's an example now with the dips. If you have shoulder issues, if it's like painful for you to do deep dips, of course you don't start there. You either start with something lighter, like an assisted dip or something, when you can like ease into that position, or you just start with a shorter range of motion and gradually expose yourself more. But the point is that when you can do these super deep dips, you're gonna build pecs and triceps, some shoulders from it, but you're also gonna improve your shoulder extension mobility in that example, you know. So what I currently do, I have a video about the entire program, upper lower push-pull leg split, where the Wednesday and Sunday are like rest days, but they are misc days for me when I put in stuff that I don't always know otherwise to put, like neck. I have had calves there, I have had core there, I have had forearms and some bicep stuff there. Sometimes I take some upper back stuff there, you know. But I just want you to give you an image, kind of, how I train. So I typically move in certain rep ranges. For these bigger compounds, I like 5 to 8 reps. I think I talked about that in a recent video, that it's like the highest low reps or the lowest high reps, you know, when you can get stronger, but it's high enough reps to be efficient for hypertrophy. And it's not that you cannot do that on some other exercises, but it just makes sense for me like this. And I like the 8 to 12 rep range for some kind of mid-tier exercises. Let's say a dumbbell press, you know, your lat pull down kind of thing. Push-pull legs, not push-pull legs, what did I mean to say? Upright rows, face pulls. Yeah, these kinds of middle, maybe some machine pushes and pulls, you know. And then certain isolation exercises I like at slightly higher reps. There's no dogma that it has to be like this. I think we can just agree on something like that you know, it's going to be hell to do 20 reps of squats all the time, at least. And I just don't think lateral raises for sets of 5 is going to be super efficient, you know. So you see what I mean? You don't have to go super high in reps on an exercise just because in isolation, or you don't have to be within 5 to 8 just because it's like a squat. But it makes sense to have, this is kind of the gradient, the continuum, but sometimes certain like compound exercise, I will do way higher reps, and certain like a dumbbell press, for instance, I have myself recently been in a slightly lower rep range, right? But you know, the like compound exercises that I see as like my bread and butter is like high bar squats or front squats. I really enjoy front squats. For me recently, I just realized that I'm more hip dominant than I thought, so I use some heel elevation and kind of work on rebuilding the form. Because this is something I should mention, while I am a bodybuilder, like I said, it's come second to health for me all the time. There's also, I want it to be some kind of expression of ability. That, you know, I already explained that a little bit around the power building thing, but I've taken this as a typical example that I've had some hip problems that has kind of limited my leg growth the last few years. Finally in the best place in a long time with that. But I could have grown my legs with doing something like a leg press, because it's the stability that was a big issue, right? But that just did not speak to me. I did not feel like blowing up my quads and be like, this is the result of me sitting in that leg press, you know? So that's an aspect of my, like, yes, bodybuilding, but certain boxes need to be ticked at all time. Like, do you understand that way of thinking? Like, yes, I want to max out size, but just with these conditions in mind, then yes, let's max out, you know. But so yeah, squats, front squats and back squats. Deadlifts, for sure. I love me some Romanian deadlifts. Those, especially when you get more advanced you have more use for them than conventional deadlifts, but I love conventional deadlifts, so especially for people earlier in their training journey. And I mean, good mornings and stuff can be good too. I just haven't done that hip hinge as much. But compounds, we're still talking, bench presses. The flat bench press, I've just gotten into my head that I need to get 140 kilos without like 3 plates, without training like a power lifter at all. I want it to be a side effect of my hypertrophy training, because I think that's kind of cool. But the flat bench, it's good. It's, again, especially for beginners and that. I have nothing bad to say about it. It's just that there are many times you could have a better option for you, like maybe even just a different bar, but something like a weighted ring push-up. For some people, even doing the dumbbell presses instead, But the incline press, I love. And that goes in a lot to, I've never had a goal physique, like I look at someone outside of myself. But I'm kind of like, how do I want to build me? Like, I always just build everything on me as much as possible, and then notice on the way, like, what do I want to focus on? And the entire yoke, I think, is something, the chest, upper chest, the delts, the upper back and traps, and the neck also, right? And so I think the incline bench press with a bar, it just, what you're looking for to get out of the exercise, as a bodybuilder especially, I just feel like you get more out of that than the flat. Nothing against the flat. It's just, I'm talking about priorities here. Shoulder presses actually haven't had to do so much. I prefer them in my way of thinking, because the front delt, you get so much from incline and flat presses anyway. So I like behind the neck press variations, because I hear some science guys talk that it shouldn't hit the mid delt so much, but in my experience, it just hits the mid-delt a lot more. So that's more what I would look for in an exercise like that. A dumbbell shoulder press, I prefer then. But upright rows, bit amazing also. I love those. Barbell rows, different variations of those, great. Your seal rows, I love me some kind of wide grip seal row. And doing that in a sort of seated rowing machine too, to get that like very much upper back isolation and rear delt pulling in some sort of way like that. And like these exercises, like weighted chin-ups and weighted dips and ring push-ups of different kinds must be mentioned. These are sort of like the bread and butter. And then, of course, we have to fill it in with isolations that I don't really have to tell you all the different ones, But I guess I just want to paint an image of what my kind of training can look like, that I want it to be an expression of skill, but just because I said that I wouldn't want to do the leg press, for instance, certain machines are great, for certain purposes. So I just want to be clear that my style, it's just whatever gets the job done and teaches me the skills and make me feel the way I want. That combo, So my point is, free weights, barbells, dumbbells, that's awesome, But calisthenics, because I've been asked so many times, do you like calisthenics or weights? I'm like, why do I have to choose, Like, I can both do them separately and together, I love weighted chin-ups. I love weighted dips. Ring push-ups are amazing, and weighted, those too, right? But yeah, some cables, what is kind of cool with cables, when it's a cable machine, is something in the middle between a machine and free weight, because, it is attached and, in line somehow, but you can move more freely through space. It's not just a complete locked in, right, like that. But then even machines, I'll use some machines in there, So that's kind of my style. We could go into talking about different body parts so much, but I do separate videos about all that. Let's see. It's like there was some final... Yeah, I guess the last thing. I wanted to talk a bit about my coaching and just talk a bit. I have done videos just to inform you guys a bit more, but I guess we have too little time now. I'm going to have to go. So I just wanted to talk about the future a little bit, It's been an amazing year for me. Very interesting to do this at the end of the year, right before a dopamine fast. That will be hellish. And you will see, I will be going through it when you see this. But, my balance, that's also something I wanted to talk about here. Balance, a certain look at life I have. This non-duality, I guess I have indirectly, But yeah, I'm definitely going to have you back, Theo. No, but the future of Uncommon Sense is really just... it's really just that's funny, guys. People often ask me about my goals and where do you want to be in a certain amount of years, and I'm often not like that. There's a certain place. It's a certain direction, you know. And I just want to keep doing what I do. But something I just noticed through certain discussions, you know, that I want to have some more work outside of Uncommon Sense, because Uncommon Sense always started. I want to be a professional too, you know, coach Theo, like I am. But the channel, it always about just helping for free, just spreading as much for free and helping out as possible. And I notice the dilemma, you know, sometimes when you feel like they're mixed up. Like, even if I put out videos for free like that, sometimes I feel like I have to for work or to be seen so I can recruit clients, you know. And so I think that's the only thing. I might even start saying, I've thought about it, just saying, yo guys, Uncommon Sense, just to try it. I'll still be Coach Theo, of course. But just to see what my mindset about the videos are like then. But that's just the only thing. I'm looking for ways to work, or I already getting that, but you know, adjusting my work so it's not as tied up with the YouTube channel, you know, that I can feel like it's a little bit more freestanding. I can just focus on helping you guys. I can do so much, guys. It would be fun to have more live streams back, but I have group coaching plans for next year too. But yeah, the future of Uncommon Sense. It's like I had something specific in mind when I wrote down this, you know. But I guess, you know, I'm just happy. This has been the biggest growth of the channel. I'm just happy to have you guys around, and I guess I want to assure you that there will be a future. And I keep going. And I love to hear the input from you guys. So now I feel like things are getting a little messy as I'm trying to boat around off and like get a little like, I wish we had talked about this. It's crazy how I can just talk for 3 hours. Just have to pause 3 or 4 times for 20 seconds or whatever it was. But yeah, that's it, guys. That has to be it. And it's just I wish I had time to talk about everything. But yeah, I'll be interested to hear your comments on this long episode. I hope it was enjoyable, and yeah. How do we, like, because you're supposed to tell the guest, you know, oh, where do we find you? It's like, you were already here. But yeah, thank you for this one, guys. I'll see you later. Peace.